Chapter 1265. Although Lu Ping knew that Liu Tianling and Lao Zu would quickly send their cultivators to participate in this grand gathering of human cultivators, he didn't expect Junling to arrive so quickly. Although Lu Ping and the large sects that received the news in advance began to occupy their encampments at the same time, Junling's arrival was only a few days later than him. At this time, most of the medium-sized sects in the Middle Plains had not yet had the time to send their cultivators to the Nine Profound Tower, let alone the overseas sects. Even if the medium-sized sects in the North Sea received the news, they did not have a secret transmission array that led directly to the Middle Plains like Junling. By the time they arrived at the Middle Plains, they would not even have a place to stand. Lu Ping was originally a bit confused, but after asking, he found out that Liu Tianyuan and Tian Tian had been traveling along the eastern coast of the Middle Plains for the past few years. They received the news from the Heavenly Moon sect, so they quickly notified the sect, which was why Junling's reaction was so fast. However, he didn't expect that Junling's relationship with the Heavenly Moon sect was already so close, which was a good thing. Speaking of the relationship between Junling and the large sects in the Middle Plains, the Heavenly Moon sect was previously connected to the Heavenly Profound sect because of Lu Ping. This was also because Lu Ping had saved the Heavenly Profound sect's direct disciple. Moreover, the deeper reason for the establishment of this relationship was because of the Heavenly Profound sect's situation at the time. Establishing a relationship with Junling itself was because of the Heavenly Profound sect's deep calculations. The fundamental reason for maintaining a relationship with the Heavenly Moon sect was that both sides were facing the attack of the Crystal Palace. The enemy of an enemy was naturally an ally. However, although the Crystal Palace was suppressing the rise of Junling in the North Sea, they were more focused on expanding their sphere of influence in the Middle Plains. From this point of view, the pressure on the Heavenly Moon sect was actually greater. The reason why Junling and the Heavenly Moon sect could be connected was because the Heavenly Moon sect and the Carefree sect had a deep relationship. Junling's Tianqin Laozu was once an elder of the boudoir of the Carefree sect. As an alchemist, Tianqin Laozu had a very high status in the boudoir. Moreover, Heavenly Moon sect had once set up an outer clan in the North Sea. Later on, the clan was wiped out by the Crystal Palace. Lu Ping sent the only surviving girl of the clan to Heavenly Moon sect, which could be considered as forming a good relationship with the sect. From the encirclement of the Nine Profound Towers Mara, it seemed that the relationship between the Heavenly Moon sect and the Heavenly Moon sect was very successful. If Junling wanted to become a large sect, then it had to cross the stormy ocean via a treasured ship and build a super long-distance teleportation array in another large sect in the Middle Plains. This process not only would the overseas sect be recognized by the Middle Plains, but it also meant that the two sects that built the super long-distance teleportation array would become allies. Junling had to be serious about this choice. Although the Heavenly Profound sect had taken the initiative to look for them, there was no doubt that Junling would not carelessly put all of its eggs in one basket. Instead, it would compare goods and repeatedly consider. However, from the looks of it now, these two large sects seemed to be very sincere. However, the Heavenly Profound sect had first been pressured by Wuxing School and the isolation of the other four holy lands, which caused the Heavenly Profound sect to have the intention to seek help from overseas. For this reason, the Heavenly Profound sect not only contacted Junling, which was about to become a large sect, but also secretly contacted the Crystal Palace. However, the problem was that the current Wuxing School had no choice but to restrain themselves after the Battle of Luoxin Mountain because they had made too many enemies. This also gave the Heavenly Profound sect a chance to breathe. Whether the Heavenly Profound sect would be as sincere to Junling as before was a variable. On the other hand, because the Heavenly Moon sect had a common enemy with Junling, it seemed more logical for the two to cooperate. Furthermore, this time, the Heavenly Moon sect had also shown enough sincerity by revealing the matter of the Nine Profound Tower to Junling. More importantly, as an important supporter of the Heavenly Moon sect in resisting the Crystal Palace, the Nine Profound Tower had been besieged by Mara for more than 10 years. Even if they were freed from Mara's siege, they would most likely suffer a great loss. Without the Nine Profound Tower as a pillar, the Heavenly Moon sect would not be able to resist the overbearing Crystal Palace. There was another more important reason, and that was that the Heavenly Moon sect was separated by the stormy ocean and the East Sea, but was much further away from Junling in the North Sea. In the encampment, Tian Fan Laozu and Tian Shui Laozu gave a general introduction of the current situation of Junling. After that, they talked about the situation of the two sects. However, they wanted to seek advice from Lu Ping. Although Lu Ping was only a third-generation disciple, his position in Junling was quite high. He already had the right to interfere with the decisions of the sect. This time, he had made such a big name for himself in the Middle Earth. Especially now that he had defeated many great practitioners, it could be said that he had already shocked the entire cultivation world. His position in Junling would only rise further. However, Lu Ping's teacher was the leader of Junling, so he naturally could not casually express his opinion. In reality, even Lu Ping himself could not decide which of the two sects to choose. However, what made Lu Ping happy was that Jiang Tianlin Laozu was already in seclusion. This meant that Jiang Tianlin Laozu had already pushed his level of practice to the peak of the mid-Dharma stage. Once he successfully passed the second lightning tribulation, then Junling would welcome its second great practitioner of the late Dharma stage. At the same time, Junling would truly have the right to aspire to become the leader of a large sect. Of course, when Tianlin Laozu advanced to the mid-Dharma stage, as well as his good friend Tian Xian and second senior sister Tian Ryu successfully condensed their Dharma powers, Lu Ping also went up to congratulate them. Among the third generation of Junling, there were many late core forging adepts who had hopes of breaking through to the Dharma stage. However, other than Tian Xian and Tian Ryu, who had recently broken through, the somewhat impatient Shen Yong had also tried to condense his Dharma power. Unfortunately, he had failed at the last moment. Shen Yong himself had also lost his qi. Without 3 to 5 years of cultivation, he would not be able to accumulate enough energy to break through to the Dharma stage. In reality, it was not only Shen Yong. There were many other practitioners who had been at the peak of the core forging stage for longer than him, such as Shen Shong, Shen Cai, Shen Bei, Shen Lei, Shen Su, and Shen Xiong, who had all tried to break through to the Dharma stage. However, these people had all failed. After Junling's Lu Tianping, Liu Tianyuan, and Tian Tian had successfully advanced to the Dharma stage, the third generation of Junling's disciples were greatly encouraged, but at the same time, they were slowly infected with a layer of impetuous emotions. It was as if the Dharma stage, which was originally like a natural moat, had become less frightening. There were also feelings of jealousy, such as if he can do it, why can't I, and so on. The third generation of Junling's disciples, on the other hand, had set off a wave of craze to break through to the Dharma stage. However, the results were very disappointing. In this wave of craze, other than Li Xuanru and Ji Shenxian who had successfully condensed their Dharma power, the others had undoubtedly failed one after another. The consequences of failure were usually very serious. This was because breaking through to the Dharma stage required the practitioner to put in all their effort. Hence, once they failed, the price they had to pay was self-evident. Not only would a large amount of training resources be wasted, but the practitioner's vitality would also be greatly damaged. Like Shen Yong, it was already very fortunate that he had only delayed his breakthrough for 3 to 4 years. Even if he had to recuperate for 10 years or more, it was not impossible that his foundation would be damaged and he would completely lose all hope of breaking through to the Dharma stage. Currently, among the 3 generations of Junling's practitioners, the number of people who had advanced to the Dharma stage had already reached 17. If the outer sect elder, Xionglu Laozu, who wielded the vast sea bell, and the third-generation practitioner, Yin Tianchu, who had been expelled from the sect, the number of Dharma adepts in Junling had reached a terrifying 19. The number of Dharma adepts at this level was already more than the number of ordinary large sects. In terms of strength, they were no longer weaker than ordinary large sects like the Hutu sect. Furthermore, other than the great Dharma adepts, the proportion of second and third generation practitioners among the Dharma adepts was also becoming more and more reasonable. It could be said that although there were twists and turns in the development of Junling, it was indeed moving in a good direction. The arrival of the practitioners in Junling had greatly increased the speed of the construction of the station, especially the half-baked 5 elements formation that Lu Ping had previously set up. At this time, under the arrangement of the Junling formation masters, It was gradually being perfected. However, at this time, Lu Ping's attention had already flown to Black Fox, who was directing a few formation masters to set up the large formation. He did not expect that Black Fox would also come this time. When Lu Ping first met her, he had already given her the complete array formation inheritance of the 5 elements sect that he obtained from Golden Cicada Ancestor. Then, Daoist Mystic Fox immediately followed the detailed explanation of the 5 elements sect's array formation inheritance, and started to reconstruct and perfect the array formation in the encampment. Black Fox was now also a cultivator in the late stage of the core forging realm. Over the years, she had been learning formations and restoring the formation runes of the treasure ship's wreckage with spiritual master Shen Chen. Her attainments in formations had also reached the level of a formation grandmaster. Lu Ping's formation inheritance happened to solve her urgent need. Perhaps this was the opportunity for her to become a formation grandmaster. Shen, who was talented in array formations, but that was all. Compared to Deng Ming, the other array formation grandmaster that Lu Ping had recruited into the sect, Shen, who was still a far cry from him. Deng Ming's talent in array formations was more groundbreaking, and he had his own style. He was someone who could become an array formation grandmaster of his generation. On the other hand, Daoist Master Black Fox was much more disciplined. Her attainments in formations were more rigid. Therefore, she needed to study the complete inheritance system of formations, and not put it in a place like the Nether Void formation so that she could comprehend the mysteries of formations on her own. The two of them had a lot to say when they met, but it was not the right time. After greeting each other, they parted amidst the laughter of the formation masters. Lu Ping had seen a few of his disciples among the core forging realm cultivators who came to the central region from Zhonling. He had not seen them for many years. He did not know how their self-cultivation was going and whether they had gone astray on the path of cultivation. Chapter 1266. Now, even the 5th generation of Zhenling sect's disciples had begun to mature. However, the disciples under Lu Ping's tutelage had turned the difficult process of becoming Lu Ping's disciple into an unwritten rule. At the very least, they still didn't have a disciple to inherit their heritage. It wasn't that there weren't people in the sect urging them to accept disciples, and it wasn't that they didn't want to accept disciples. It was just that in their eyes, Lu Ping was only a late core forging realm cultivator with his current achievements. They were far inferior to their teacher, so how could they be qualified to teach others? Lu Ping had 3 direct disciples, Wang Xuanqi, Tian Shenyu, and Du Shenluo. There were also 3 in-name disciples, Fang Xianwei, Fang Xuanxia, and Zheng Xuanwu. Wang Xuanqi's cultivation was at the 6th stage of the core forging stage, and he stood out among the 4th generation of Zhenling's disciples. Tian Shenyu didn't come with the sect, but he was an alchemist, so his cultivation progress was slower. As for Du Jialuo, he had advanced to the mid-stage of the core forging stage and was only 1 step away from advancing to the 5th stage. Among the 3 in-name disciples, only Zheng Xuanwu came. His cultivation had broken through to the mid-stage of the core forging stage, and he was the same as Du Jialuo. Among the 3 in-name disciples, Wang Xuanqi already had the qualifications to advance to the late stage of the core forging stage. However, he remembered Lu Ping's instructions and didn't rush to smelt the heaven and earth spiritual objects. Instead, after advancing to the 6th stage of the core forging stage, he began to follow his own path of cultivation to strengthen his foundation. Originally, Wang Xuanqi's cultivation was considered the fastest among the 4th generation disciples. However, Wang Xuanqi's cultivation had stagnated at the core forging stage 6th layer for several years without any progress. On the other hand, there were many talented disciples among the 4th generation of Zhenling sect who had caught up to him. However, before these people could be complacent, they suddenly realized that although Wang Xuanqi's cultivation progress had slowed down, his strength was getting more and more daunting. The cultivators who were supposed to lose to Wang Xuanqi after 30 moves couldn't even last 10 moves after advancing to the 6th stage of the core forging stage. Du Xuanluo's aptitude was the strongest among Lu Ping's disciples. However, he had never displayed any outstanding talent in front of others. His cultivation speed could only be considered above average. Among the 4th generation of Zhenling sect's disciples, His cultivation speed wasn't particularly outstanding, but it wasn't particularly eye-catching. However, only Wang Xuanqi knew how difficult it was to deal with this third junior brother of his. Du Xianluo cultivated an earth elemental skill, and the density of the true essence in his body was something that Wang Xuanqi had never seen before in his life. Earth elemental skill was good for defense, and Wang Xuanqi was famous for his sharp swordsmanship in Jinling sect. However, when the two of them fought, even though Wang Xuanqi's cultivation was far superior to Du Xuanluo's, it would take more than 50 rounds to break his defense. It could be seen how difficult it was to deal with Du Xianluo. Du Xuanluo's cultivation method was slightly different from Wang Xuanqi's. Wang Xuanqi's cultivation method was to push his cultivation to a certain bottleneck at a relatively fast speed, and then start to consolidate his foundation. When the time was right, he would break through the bottleneck in one go, causing his cultivation to increase by leaps and bounds again. Moreover, he didn't have to worry about his foundation being unstable. Du Xianluo, on the other hand, cultivated steadily from the beginning. His cultivation progress wasn't fast, but every step he took forward made his foundation extremely solid. In the early stages, his cultivation progress was very inconspicuous, but as his cultivation increased, more and more people began to gradually fall behind because of their unstable foundation and other various reasons. At this time, Du Jialuo's steady progress was very eye-catching. However, because he was the direct disciple of the water sword immortal, Lu Tianping, this progress seemed to be reasonable in the eyes of everyone. Du Xianluo had kept a low profile among the fourth-generation disciples of Zhenling. However, compared to Zheng Xuanwu, Du Xuanluo's identity as the direct disciple of Soundwave Manor was also eye-catching. On the other hand, up until now, most of the people in Zhenling still thought that this cultivator who patrolled Huangli Island every day was only an outer court cultivator of Zhenling. Zheng Xuanwu's aptitude wasn't outstanding when compared to Du Xianluo and Wang Xuanqi, but Zheng Xuanwu's strength lay in his diligence and persistence towards cultivation. This was also the reason why Lu Ping took him in after he gave him the opportunity to enter Zhenling to cultivate. This disciple was extremely similar to Lu Ping in many aspects. Just as Lu Ping was teaching a few of his disciples, a hurried whistling sound rang out. Lu Ping's expression froze, and he had no choice but to stop teaching. After giving a few instructions to his 3 disciples, he had already broken through the void and disappeared. Outside Zhenling Station, Lu Ping's figure appeared outside the formation shield that had yet to be completely set up. At this time, Tian Fan, Tian Shui, Tian Shan, and the other Dharma adepts of Zhenling had already arrived. Not far away, a beam of light shot over. It was Ji Tianxian riding a flying puppet bird. Seeing the crowd from afar, he said, "There's an army of Mara going up the Qingming River. It looks like they're coming for us. Tian Yuan, Tian Tian, and the 2 Qin brothers are trying to stop the Mara army along the way. However, it looks like they won't be able to hold them off for long." Tian Shan Laozu asked in a low voice, "How's their strength?" Ji Tianxian heaved a sigh of relief and said, "We've found at least 4 Jade Mara and close to 10 Blood Mara." Everyone's expression changed. For Jade Mara joining forces was equivalent to the strength of 2 great adepts. In addition to the 10 Blood Mara, their strength had already far surpassed the current Zhenling. Moreover, what Tianxian and the others had found might not be the entire number of Mara army. In the station, Mystical Fox Enlightened was flying over. When Tianfan Laozu saw her, he asked, "How long will it take for the station's great formation to be set up?" Mystical Fox Enlightened was stunned for a moment. She glanced at Lu Ping and said, "It'll probably take another 2 hours. Tianfan Laozu said, "We have to try our best to delay this group of Mara. At the very least, we have to wait until the station's great formation is set up. Otherwise, even if we manage to repel this group of Mara, I'm afraid we'll suffer heavy losses." Lu Ping also said, "Get the disciples to set up the Dao soldier formation and prepare for battle. Speed up the installation of the station's defensive formation. This disciple will first go and meet this group of Mara army." Tianfan, Tian Shui, and Tianfan Laozu wanted to go as well. However, Lu Ping said, "However, senior uncle Tianfan can go alone. The station still needs the 2 senior granduncles to oversee it." The arrival of this group of Mara army is very suspicious. If there's some small fry taking the opportunity to cause trouble, we'll be fully prepared. Tian Shui Laozu's expression changed. You're saying that this group of Mara army was intentionally lured here by someone to frame us? Lu Ping muttered to himself, there's no harm in being prepared. In any case, we must not fall into their trap of luring us away. Lu Ping was indeed worried. Junling was, after all, an overseas sect. Furthermore, it was an unknown medium-sized sect. Putting aside the fact that they arrived early, the moment they arrived in the Central Plains, they displayed such a strong performance because of him. Furthermore, the strength they displayed was even stronger than ordinary large sects. This inevitably aroused the resentment of other sects. If someone really lured over the Mara army, with Tian Fan and Tian Shui, who were comparable to grand cultivators overseeing the station, they wouldn't have to worry about their nest being raided. Tian Xian and Tian Ayu followed the two Laozu and stayed behind to guard the camp. As for Lu Ping, he brought Lu Hai and Laozu along the Qingming River to meet up with Tian Tian, Tian Yuan, and the Qin brothers. In just a short moment, the three of them could already hear the rumbling of the battle on the surface of the Qingming River. This place was less than 100 miles away from Junling's station. Tian Fan and Tian Shui, the two Laozu, should be able to feel the spiritual energy vibrations from the Qingming River due to the battle. Qin Yu and Qin Gang had already suffered some injuries. Both of them tried their best to cooperate with Tian Tian and Tian Yuan to block the 6 blood Mara that were chasing after them. Tian Yuan used his earth element real body to block the attack of 2 blood Shura. At the side, Tian Tian immediately followed up with a divine ability. One of the blood Shura couldn't dodge in time, so it cried out and took on Tian Tian's divine ability. Instantly, it was injured. As for Qin Yu and Qin Gang, their attacks were slightly slower. After the 2 blood Shura dodged their attacks, they only delayed their pursuit. However, the 4 Mara behind them caught up. Qin Yu and Qin Gang's abilities were undoubtedly much weaker than Tian Tian and Tian Yuan's. Originally, among the 3rd generation of Junling's disciples, other than Lu Ping, Tian Tian's cultivation was the strongest. However, now that Tian Yuan's abilities had surpassed Tian Tian's by quite a bit, Lu Ping knew that this was because Tian Yuan had refined the Dharma soul left behind by Tian Kang Laozu after he passed away. After Tian Kang Laozu passed away, he left behind a second tribulation spiritual treasure, the mountain-splitting axe, which was now in Laozu's possession. However, Tian Shan Laozu had refused to refine the Dharma soul, leaving it for his own disciple, Tian Yuan, to refine. After Liu Tianyuan had advanced to the Dharma stage and refined the Dharma soul, the growth of his abilities had far surpassed that of Tian Tian, who had advanced to the Dharma stage before him. Now that Liu Tianyuan had not only mastered his natal great magic, the earth element real body, his level of practice had also soared all the way to the peak of the early Dharma stage. This time, the 4 of them had obstructed the Mara's army from traveling up the river. If not for Liu Tianyuan, their harassment would have been like sheep in a tiger's den. Lu Ping and the others rushed over. Tian Shan Laozu stretched out his hand and the mountain-splitting axe appeared in his hand. With a wave of his hand, a door in space opened. When Tian Shan Laozu reappeared, he was already in the air above Liu Tianyuan and the others. Kill! Tian Shan Laozu roared, and the mountain-splitting axe slashed towards the head of the blood Mara that was pouncing on him again. The unparalleled power of the second tribulation spiritual treasure caused the few blood Mara below to panic. Lu Hai looked excited, holding the Taishen tomahawk in his hand, shouting loudly to join the battle. Only Lu Ping stood still at the side. Naturally, he did not care about the few blood Mara. Instead, his gaze was fixed on the Qingming River a few miles away. There, a group of Mara's army was traveling up the Qingming River. Lu Ping had already sensed the hidden aura of Azura. Chapter 1267. To put it bluntly, the foundation of a sect was the preparation before it could be unleashed. Any sect would always be racking their brains for the growth of their own sect's foundation. However, the foundation had to be used, but there were only 2 types of times when it could be used. One was when the sect was in danger, and the other was when it was about to rise. However, under normal circumstances, The sects in the world of practitioners would combine these two situations together. The reason for this was the once-in-a-thousand-years Mara disaster. The rise of every sect would have a big or small impact on the order of the world of practitioners. This was because, regardless of whether the rise of a sect was successful or not, it would inevitably be met with a bloodbath. Even if it was successful, it would be greatly weakened and enter a new period of weakness. Without hundreds of years of cultivation, it would be impossible to recover. However, these hundreds of years of cultivation rarely overlapped with the disaster of Mara. Once the sect was faced with such a situation again, it was very likely that it would not be able to avoid it. However, the arrival of the disaster of Mara would also require the sect to unleash its own foundation as much as possible. It was undoubtedly impossible for a sect to consecutively accumulate so much in such a short period of time. At the very least, it was an extremely risky thing to do. Hence, when the disaster of Mara descended, taking the opportunity to complete the rise of the sect became a more reliable method. After thousands of years of accumulation, when the disaster of Mara was successfully unleashed, a medium-sized sect would usually be able to cultivate more than 10 Dharma adepts in a short period of time. Once the disaster of Mara was over, if the sect did not suffer too many losses, it would often usher in a golden opportunity to rise again. Furthermore, the rise of the sect under such circumstances, other than facing the disaster of Mara, would rarely be met with the suppression and destruction of the original order of the world of practitioners. This was because when the disaster of Mara descended, all the sects would not be able to take care of themselves. Naturally, they would not be able to care about whether other sects would take the opportunity to rise. To put it bluntly, this kind of foundation was the intentional accumulation of the sect, but in reality, it could indeed be easily controlled. At the very least, it could be controlled to explode on the eve of the arrival of the Mara calamity. Just like Zhenling's sect, almost 20 Dharma adepts had suddenly appeared. Not only Zhenling, but all the other sects would also have a large increase in the number of Dharma adepts at this time. It was just that because each sect had different accumulations, the amount of energy that erupted when the disaster of Mara descended was different. In fact, this kind of eruption was usually clearly differentiated. Which cultivators advanced due to their own strength and which ones took a shortcut? Naturally, the masters of the various sects had a tacit understanding about this. Even the cultivators themselves were aware of this. Even the cultivators who took shortcuts usually had to pay a higher price for the sect. This was because these people would not even have the qualifications to advance to the Dharma stage in the past. Now that they had such an opportunity, they had to pay the price of being cannon fodder. When danger descended, they would be the first wave of people to rush forward. And to the sects, although these people had reached the Dharma stage, they were not the true successors of the sect. This was because after they had advanced to the Dharma stage, they had no possibility of advancing further. The reason why the sect still supported them was so that they could protect the true elites of the sect. Therefore, after the Great Mara calamity, the number of Dharma adepts in the world of cultivation would drop to a whole new level. However, other than some special circumstances, most of the Dharma adepts who survived were the true elites of their sect. And in Zhenling, the people who played the role of cannon fodder now seemed to be the first generation of the sect and a considerable number of second-generation cultivators. And the essence of the sect's legacy was undoubtedly the third generation of direct disciples who had successfully advanced to the Dharma stage by relying on their own strength and training. Of course, among the third generation of Zhenling adepts, there would also be people who had lost the opportunity to advance under normal circumstances and had no choice but to take shortcuts. And there would probably be more of them. And their fate would be the same as the second generation of adepts. They would also be the vanguard to protect the legacy of Zhenling. However, if Zhenling wanted to successfully rise as a complete sect in the process of the disaster of Mara, then it could only do its best to reflect the accumulated power of the sect in the explosive growth of the Dharma adepts. It also had to do its best to preserve the number of Dharma adepts in the process of resisting the disaster of Mara. Lu Ping faced the army of Mara moving upstream. Naturally, he knew that regardless of whether this was a secret plot, it was a test that Zhenling was facing. And what Zhenling could do was to try its best to preserve its own strength and defeat the invading army of Mara. Although Qianshan Laozu's level of practice had not yet stabilized, in the face of a few blood mara, and with the mountain-splitting axe in hand, Lu Ping did not have to worry that the cautious and steady Qianshan Laozu would fail miserably. Furthermore, there were 5 Dharma adepts beside him. In a flash, Lu Ping had already arrived at the back of the battle. There was still some distance between this place and the army of Mara that was moving upstream. However, Lu Ping was suspended in mid-air and did not move. However, the spiritual qi around him had begun to vibrate violently. Lu Ping was like a bottomless abyss, greedily gathering and absorbing the spiritual qi within a radius of tens of feet. This scale continued to expand until it affected the army of Mara that was coming from afar. This majestic vibration of the spiritual qi even caused the army of Mara in the Qingming River to be in a state of chaos. The aura of the Azura that was hidden within the army of Mara had also increased exponentially. Only then was the chaos suppressed, allowing the army of Mara to advance once again. However, at this time, the army of Mara seemed to know that their sneak attack had failed. However, they still relied on their large numbers to forcefully attack. Countless large and small Mara rose from the waters of the Qingming River. At this time, the true power of the army of Mara was exposed in front of Lu Ping. There were more than 10 large and small blood Mara. In addition to the 6 blood Mara that had been stopped by Qianshan Laozu and the rest, there were more than 20 blood Mara. The Jade Mara did not only have 4, but 7. There was also the Azura that was hidden in the center of the army of Mara. At this time, it was releasing its aura without restraint, pressing towards Lu Ping, who was blocking the front alone. Lu Ping's mouth curled into a smile. He had originally wanted to force the army of Mara out of the Qingming River. This time, it was exactly what he wanted. He had a lot of time left. Lu Ping suddenly roared and said, "Rise." As soon as he spoke, the spirit qi of heaven and earth that Lu Ping had gathered suddenly exploded, forming a huge spirit qi storm within a radius of 3 miles. Then, it gradually evolved into a vibration like a spirit qi tide. It was a reference to the spirit qi tide in the land of 5 elements. Lu Ping's hands formed a seal. As the seals formed, he shouted, "Condense." The turbulent spirit qi of heaven and earth within a radius of 3 miles suddenly calmed down with Lu Ping's shout. However, at this time, anyone could feel the uneasiness hidden under this strange calm. The Azura that was hidden in the army of Mara could no longer bear it. With a shrill cry, the army of Mara quickly moved aside to make a path. 4 Jade Mara rushed forward, 3 Jade Shura in front, and 1 Jade Demon in the back. They all rushed towards Lu Ping. At the same time, the originally calm spirit qi of heaven and earth suddenly became turbulent again. It turned out that the Azura had discovered something, and began to disturb the spirit qi of heaven and earth within a radius of 3 miles that was controlled by Lu Ping. Too late. Lu Ping laughed and quickly formed a seal with his hands. A strange roar came from Lu Ping's mouth. The purple and gold clouds behind Lu Ping grew, and the Dharma of the dragon appeared in the clouds. Finally, it hovered above Lu Ping's head. A giant dragon head flashed in the clouds. At this time, Lu Ping shouted again, "Draw the purple and gold clouds headed towards the direction of the army of Mara." As Lu Ping shouted, it formed a whirlpool, and a steady stream of water began to gather in the whirlpool. At this time, the army of Mara suddenly realized that the spirit qi of heaven and earth within a radius of 3 miles had long been under Lu Ping's control. As Lu Ping performed his magic, the spirit qi of heaven and earth turned into countless tentacles or ropes that wrapped around each of the Mara's bodies. Mara's devouring. Although the army of Mara was surprised by Lu Ping's method, they were not worried. To them, the spirit qi of heaven and earth was originally a nourishment for them, and they could absorb as much as they wanted. However, as they absorbed the spirit qi of heaven and earth into their bodies, they suddenly found that the spirit qi of heaven and earth could not be refined at all. Instead, it formed needles of spirit qi that rampaged through Mara's body, turning the world upside down. The water vapor within a radius of 3 miles had gathered in the auspicious clouds above Lu Ping's head, and the needles of spirit qi were expelled from Mara's body. However, they never noticed that as these needles of spirit qi were expelled from their bodies, streams of water vapor also dissipated, and then were absorbed by the whirlpool of the auspicious clouds. Neither the Blood Azura nor the Jade Mara noticed anything strange, but the Azura hiding in the center of Mara's army had already noticed something was wrong. After a violent roar, the entire Mara's army fell into chaos again. A part of the Mara's army rushed towards Lu Ping, seemingly trying to interrupt the spell he was casting, while another part of the Mara's army gathered around the Azura. It seemed that the Azura could break Lu Ping's magic, but the area it could control was limited. It could not gather many Maras in a radius of several feet. Before the Mara's army that was rushing towards Lu Ping could reach Lu Ping, the little Mara, who was equivalent to the blood condensation realm, quickly turned into dried corpses due to the loss of water in their bodies. Immediately after, the skin of the big Mara's body began to crack, and they fell to the ground amidst the continuous howling. The Mara's army became more and more chaotic. Even the Blood Asuras became listless due to the loss of water vapor in their bodies. Chapter 1268. In Zhenling's encampment, after Lu Ping and the rest had left, a few Zhenling's array masters had helped mystical fox spiritual master embed the 5 elements ring into a 5 elements array plate. With that, the construction speed of the encampment's great array immediately increased by a lot. The spiritual qi ripples from the Qingming River downstream became clearer and more intense. The entire Zhenling's people immediately became more alert. It was obvious that Lu Ping and the rest had already engaged in battle with Mara's army. They wanted to delay Mara's army before the encampment's great array was completed. Under the command of Li Tianru and Ji Tianxian, more than a dozen third-generation elite disciples of late-stage core forging realm each led a team of Zhenling sect cultivators and began to set up the 3 talents and 5 elements Dao soldier formation, just in case. However, just when everyone's attention was attracted by the intense spiritual qi ripples from the Qingming River downstream and Mara's miserable cries, a strange laughter suddenly rang out from the encampment. A black ray of light silently appeared in the sky above the encampment where Zhenling's disciples were gathering. Both of his hands pressed down in the air, and 2 strange rays of light flashed past the surface of his palms. A violent wave caused the surrounding space to tremble, descending towards the heads of the Zhenling cultivators. A violent and ferocious aura instantly filled the sky, causing the expressions of everyone in Zhenling to change. A late-stage Dharma adept. He was actually shameless enough to directly attack the gathered core forging cultivators of Zhenling. Presumptuous. Tian Shui Laozu shouted angrily. In the blink of an eye, he and Tian Fan Laozu appeared in the encampment. The wind-snow double fan fanned, one with wind while the other with snow. The 2 fans combined harmoniously, instantly dispelling the sneak attacker's attack layer by layer. The attacker's attack missed and was about to attack again. However, Tian Shui and Tian Fan, the 2 Laozu, had already leapt into the air, taking the initiative to attack first. For a moment, the great cultivator was actually unable to attack. Although the wind-snow double fan was only a first tribulation spiritual treasure, when the 2 fans combined harmoniously, its power was not too far off from a second tribulation spiritual treasure. In addition, Tian Shui and Tian Fan had been Laozu's cultivation companions for hundreds of years. Their minds were already connected. When the 2 of them combined harmoniously, they were actually able to completely suppress the great cultivator in front of them. However, the 2 Laozu also noticed that although the cultivator in front of them was in the late transcendence realm, the aura around him was somewhat strange. It seemed like he had just advanced to the late transcendence realm not too long ago. However, he gave the 2 of them a familiar feeling, but they just couldn't recall who he was. Tian Shui Laozu could see that the person in front of her was clearly not familiar with his own cultivation. His strength was still quite a distance away from a veteran great cultivator. Seeing that they had forced this person to retreat to the outskirts of Zhenling's encampment, she was about to unleash her full strength to teach this great cultivator a lesson. Unexpectedly, Tian Fan Laozu, who was beside her, suddenly signaled for her to hold on. Tian Shui Laozu was startled. What a close shave. If this was the opponent's plan to lure the tiger away from the mountain, she almost fell for it this time. Tian Fan Laozu, who was at the side, spoke in a deep voice, "You are a great cultivator, and you must be a famous person in the cultivation world. Yet, you sneak attacked our sect's core forging realm disciples. Aren't you afraid of being ridiculed by others in the cultivation world? The great cultivator's entire body was shrouded in black fog, causing others to be unable to see his true appearance. When he heard Tian Fan Laozu's words, he let out a weird laugh and pounced towards Tian Fan and Tian Shui once again. Come at me. Tian Fan Laozu didn't show any signs of weakness. With a sweep of the fan in his hand, Tian Shui Laozu, who was at the side, immediately understood and wanted to assist from the side. Unexpectedly, when the great cultivator soared into the sky, another figure flew out from behind him. This time, it was heading straight for Junling's encampment. Not good, there's another person on the other side. He's a great cultivator. Tian Shui Laozu was horrified. She could no longer care about joining hands with Tian Fan Laozu. With a spin of the snow fan in her hand, she fanned towards the other person who rushed out. Dong! Bang! 2 consecutive sounds could be heard. Tian Fan Laozu was slightly better off. The strange great cultivator's true strength was limited. He was only able to force Tian Fan Laozu back. On the other side, Tian Shui Laozu wasn't as lucky. The second great cultivator who appeared seemed to want to attack Junling's encampment. In reality, he was taking advantage of the time when Tian Shui Laozu was rushing over to rescue him to suddenly attack her with a divine ability. This second great cultivator was originally a true great cultivator. When he attacked, Tian Shui Laozu was caught unprepared. Instantly, she suffered a huge loss. The qi and blood in her body were in turmoil, and she was nearly heavily injured to the point of vomiting blood. Tian Fan Laozu hurriedly went to support Tian Shui Laozu. The 2 of them joined hands to confront the 2 great cultivators. Currently, Junling was obviously at a disadvantage. The newly appeared great cultivator stopped after a single attack. He basically had no intention of attacking a low-leveled cultivator like Junling. However, the strange cultivator who appeared first didn't have such a low limit. Once the opponent joined hands to defeat Tian Fan and Tian Shui, the cultivators in Junling's encampment would definitely be met with a calamity. Tian Fan Laozu's expression was terrifyingly gloomy. He spoke in a serious tone, "The Battle of Mara is imminent. With a great enemy before us, are the 2 of you sure you want to fight to the death with me, Junling? Are you sure you want to make your enemies happy? Looking at the 2 of you, you must have a sect backing you. If we husband and wife were to risk our lives and drag on for a while, the cultivators in the vicinity will definitely rush over. At that time, you might be able to preserve your lives. However, what about the sects behind you?" The strange cultivator who was shrouded in black fog sneered, "So what if someone rushes over? Who would help you, Junling, for no reason? Furthermore, you, Junling, have such great prestige. A mid-sized sect is able to defeat many large sects. Who knows how many people are secretly hoping for you to suffer? The old man and the others are merely helping them vent their anger." Tian Shui Laozu and Tian Fan Laozu's heart sank. This time, Junling was indeed a little too ostentatious. Not only did he occupy a treasure land, he even ruthlessly slapped a large sect in the face. It was hard to guarantee that no one would be secretly resentful and take advantage of this opportunity to vent their anger. Tian Fan Laozu spoke coldly. "In that case, the Mara's army in the Azure Netherworld River was also lured over by you." Without waiting for the strange great cultivator to appear, the great cultivator who came later quickly spoke, "Don't talk nonsense with them. They are stalling for time. Let's end this quickly." The 2 of them rushed down again. The strange cultivator was wearing a glove-like First Tribulation spiritual treasure, while the other also had a spiritual treasure to protect himself. However, both of their spiritual treasures seemed to be very inconspicuous. Furthermore, the spiritual light on the surface of the spiritual treasure was obscure. Either the quality of the spiritual treasure was too low, or they had used a special secret technique to conceal the true appearance of the spiritual treasure. In the cultivation world, the number of spiritual treasures was limited. Clearly, the 2 of them had some misgivings. They didn't want others to track them through the spiritual treasures they used. The joint secret technique of Tian Fan and Tian Shui, the 2 Laozu, could only be used to deal with one great cultivator. Once 2 great cultivators attacked, the 2 of them could no longer work together to deal with the enemy. Left with no choice, the two Laozu could only split up and fight one at a time. If it wasn't for the fact that the two Laozu, Tian Fan and Tian Shui, could be considered as veteran mid-Dharma adepts and had sufficient experience in fighting against their enemies, while the other party had misgivings about their identities and didn't dare to reveal too many of their techniques, the two Laozu would have long been defeated. Seeing the two Laozu retreating in mid-air, Li Tianru and Ji Tianxian were extremely anxious. However, they knew that even if the two of them rushed forward, it would be useless in front of the two great cultivators. Right now, they could only hurry up and form the 3 talents and 5 elements Dao soldier formation. With the power of the Dao soldier formation, they might be able to fight against the two great cultivators. However, they were afraid that the two Laozu would not be able to hold on until the Dao soldier formation was formed. Although Li Tianru and Ji Tianxian were anxious, they still didn't dare to show the slightest bit of panic. They forced themselves to calm down and orderly commanded the cultivators under them to get into position, hoping to activate the Dao soldier formation as soon as possible. Although Tianfan Laozu was being suppressed by the strange great cultivator in front of him, the great cultivator's strength was clearly not comparable to the other great cultivator. Therefore, although Tianfan Laozu was in a sorry state, he was still able to hold on. On the other side, Tian Shui Laozu had already been beaten by the great cultivator to the point of vomiting blood. However, Tian Shui Laozu didn't dare to retreat anymore. Behind her was Zhenling's encampment, which was slowly being strengthened. If she were to retreat again, Zhenling's encampment would really be opened up to the two of them. That great cultivator could clearly see through Tian Shui Laozu's determination to die. He sneered and formed a seal. The jade belt on his waist suddenly lit up. Just as a cloud of mist soared, before the great cultivator's divine ability could be formed, a sharp child's voice suddenly rang out, "Kill." A small person the size of a foot pierced through the air. In his hand was a small willow wooden sword. A cold light flickered from the tip of the sword, aiming straight for the great cultivator's eyes. Secret technique of splitting the heavens, external body incarnation. The great cultivator let out a strange cry. He tilted his head back and dodged Lu Xiaoping's attack. However, the divine ability that was gradually forming in his hand was interrupted by this sudden attack, saving Tian Shui Laozu from the hopeless situation. Tian Shui Laozu originally had a fiery temper. After suffering such a huge loss, she became even more furious. With a loud shout, she wanted to fight to the death with the great cultivator. In addition, with Lu Xiaoping's cultivation gradually approaching that of a normal mid-Dharma adepts, the great cultivator couldn't do anything to the two of them for the time being. Lu Xiaoping was originally left behind by Lu Ping to protect himself before he left the campsite. After Lu Xiaoping had absorbed a small portion of the spiritual energy of one of the 5 spirits in the treasured cauldron of heaven and earth, his own aptitude had increased tremendously. After this period of meticulous nurturing by Lu Ping, this avatar's strength was already no weaker than a peak early Dharma adept. In addition, it was an avatar that disregarded life and death. If it continued to pester the opponent, even a mid-Dharma adept would have a headache. The great cultivator who was being pestered by Tian Shui Laozu and Lu Xiaoping was anxious. This time, they had taken a huge risk by sneaking an attack on Zhenling. Originally, they wanted to take advantage of the situation. However, they didn't expect that Zhenling was already prepared. Furthermore, he was so difficult to deal with. Hence, he shouted, "What are you waiting for? What are you waiting for?" Tian Shui and Tian Fan Laozu's expressions changed. The opponent had actually hidden someone and hadn't made a move yet. Chapter 1269. Just as the great cultivator finished speaking, a cold snort came from the void. How troublesome. When the voice rang out, Tian Shui and Tian Shui's hearts seemed to have fallen into an icehouse. The other party actually had a great cultivator hiding in the surroundings. As for why this person hadn't appeared, Laozu and Tian Shui knew very well. That was because there were dozens of different cultivators' divine senses in the surroundings of Zhenling's encampment. The time since Zhenling was attacked was long enough to attract cultivators from other sects to investigate. However, these people didn't help Zhenling. Therefore, Zhenling was almost certain that these people were from a large sect in Middle-earth. The cultivators from other sects had also sensed or suspected their identities. However, none of them dared to step forward and offend this large sect that was targeting Zhenling. After all, Zhenling was an overseas sect. Moreover, it was a sect that had always been criticized in North Sea's cultivation world. To most of the sects in Middle-earth, Zhenling was an anomaly. Naturally, they wouldn't offend another large sect for Zhenling's sake. On the contrary, they were happy to see Zhenling, a middle-sized sect that didn't know what was good for them, become a joke. However, they couldn't go too far. After all, Zhenling was trying to encircle and annihilate Mara's army. He had a righteous cause. Not to mention that this large sect was taking advantage of the situation, they even sent out 2 great cultivators to seize the encampment of a middle-sized sect that didn't even have a great cultivator. This was already somewhat unreasonable. Under such circumstances, they couldn't do anything to the other party. Now, they sent out a 3rd great cultivator. This was blatantly shameless. It was very likely to arouse the disgust of everyone. If they were to unite against a common enemy, it would be the same as shooting a rock and dropping it on their own feet. The 3rd great cultivator was well aware of the twists and turns in this matter, so he was originally extremely unwilling to get involved. Even if he managed to expel Zhenling, his sect would definitely become the laughingstock of the entire cultivation world. However, the current situation made it difficult for him to back down, because the longer this dragged on, the more disadvantageous it would be for them. This was especially so for the 3rd-generation adept from the North Sea sects. Even Zhu Donghuang himself did not have the slightest confidence that he would be able to defeat this person. Furthermore, the mid-Dharma adept with the 2nd-level spirit treasure was not easy to deal with either. If they returned in time and gave up on this base, and instead went all out to fight the 3 of them, then the 3 of them would be the ones who would suffer. After Zhenling had successfully expelled the Hutu sect, they had tried their best to estimate Zhenling's strength. However, in the end, they realized that they had still underestimated this medium-sized sect from the North Sea. This time, they had not underestimated the strength of their experts, but the unity of the entire Zhenling. Dozens of miles away, above the Qingming River, countless mummified Mara corpses fell from the sky like dumplings, splashing water on the surface of the Qingming River. Lu Ping stood alone in the sky above the Qingming River. Within a 3-mile radius around him, none of the smaller Mara could escape the destruction of this spell. There were more than 10 blood Mara, and only 4 blood demons were hiding in a safe zone that Azura had fought hard to secure from Lu Ping's spell. In this safe zone, there were still 3 Jade Shuras and 1 Jade Demon. The other 2 Jade Shuras and 1 Jade Demon did not have time to hide in the safe zone that Azura had fought so hard to secure. The Jade Shura that had rushed towards Lu Ping had tried to use the strange spell that Lu Ping was casting, but before it could reach Lu Ping, its entire body had already begun to wither. By the time it had reached Lu Ping, its strength had already been reduced to 50 to 60%. Lu Ping had just used the thin water-flowing sword to gently twist the Jade Shura into pieces. The other Jade Shura was also heavily injured, but it was still able to survive the attack of Lu Ping's miraculous spell. At the same time, the 3 Blood Mara had survived. The Jade Demon was not so lucky. It had the same plan as the other Jade Shura. It wanted to use the Soul Eater spell to damage Lu Ping's will, and then break free from Lu Ping's control of the space. But the Soul Eater spell did not do anything under the protection of the Cloud Sail. On the contrary, it was hit by Lu Ping's will, which was even stronger than before. Then, an invisible soul fire burned the Jade Demon, and it screamed. It could no longer resist Lu Ping's spell, and it was turned into a dried corpse. When it fell into the Qingming River, it melted into wisps of spirit and disappeared. At this moment, Lu Ping had become a true demon god in the eyes of the demon Luos. Even the demon Luo army, which had always been fearless of death, shuddered in the face of Lu Ping's unimaginable power. Despite the Azura's repeated urging, the demon Luo army still refused to advance. The power of this strike not only frightened the demonic Luo army, but even Lu Ping himself felt a chill run down his spine. He never thought that the supreme divine art, Sea of Mulberry Fields chant, could be used in such a way, and it could even create such a terrifying effect. With this attack, 700 or 800 big and small Mara were killed. 7 Blood Mara and 2 Jade Mara were completely killed. 1 Jade Shura and 3 Blood Mara were seriously injured. Although the Mara army still had strength, they were all scared by Lu Ping. Not a single Mara dared to move forward. The Azura hid in the center. Although it tried to urge the army to move forward, it never showed up in front of Lu Ping. Lu Ping turned back. 3 of the 6 Blood Mara were killed by the attacks of Tianshan Laozu, Tian Tian, and Liu Qianyuan. The remaining 3 were not scared by Tianshan Laozu's second tribulation spiritual treasure. Instead, they were scared by Lu Ping's shocking attack. Before Lu Ping could turn back, they had already covered their heads and fled. Seeing Lu Ping return, Qin Yu and Qin Gang were already scared out of their wits. Even though Tian Tian and Liu Qianyuan had seen many miracles of Lu Ping, they could only be speechless in front of such a powerful attack. Only Tianshan Laozu was still somewhat clear-headed. However, he was also scared out of his wits by Lu Ping's thunderous attack. He coughed and said, "Junior nephew Lu, you, junior uncle." Lu Ping interrupted Tianshan Laozu's words without hesitation and said, "Mara's army was scared out of their wits for the moment. However, they will soon realize that there are still reinforcements behind this Mara's army. Now that we have bought enough time, we must return to the station immediately." A hint of clarity flashed across Tianshan Laozu's eyes and he immediately said, "Now is the time when Mara's army is scared out of their wits. We can charge forward and kill for a while. This will also reduce the pressure on our sect before Mara's army reaches the station." Lu Ping sighed and said worriedly, "Something has happened to the station. Someone is taking advantage of the situation. I'm afraid that Tian Fan and Tian Shui won't be able to hold on much longer." Just as the third great cultivator was about to make a move, 2 consecutive shouts came from Zhenling's station. Following that, a majestic roar sounded out. Dozens of Zhenling's core Forging Realm disciples instantly created the imposing aura of a magnificent army. This kind of concentrated imposing aura soared into the sky and directly offset the pressure brought by the great cultivator who just appeared. Furthermore, it directly supported Tian Fan and Tian Shui who were struggling to hold on. It even faintly showed signs of overtaking them. This is a Dao soldier formation? How could Zhenling form a Dao soldier formation in such a short period of time? Not only the 3 great cultivators who launched a sneak attack on Zhenling, even the cultivators from various sects who were watching the battle from the surrounding void were astonished and horrified. It was too fast. Zhenling's Dao soldier formation was too fast. What kind of coordination and tacit understanding did the dozens of cultivators in the formation have to achieve in order to gather everyone's strength in the formation so quickly? Under the lead of Li Tianru and Ji Tianxian, the 2 Dharma plane adepts, the 3 talents 5 elements Dao soldier formation slowly began to operate. Very quickly, it rose into the sky and received the 2 exhausted Laozu, Tian Fan and Tian Shui, into the formation. It also attempted to surround the 3 great cultivators in the formation. The cultivator who was wrapped in the black fog and the great cultivator who appeared at the end were quick to react. They quickly threw themselves out of the formation's encirclement. It was already not easy for dozens of people to work together in a Dao soldier formation to achieve such tacit understanding. However, it was something that the Dao soldier formation was helpless against. However, the second great cultivator suffered a great loss due to his carelessness. His avatar, Lu Xiaoping, actually took a blow from the great cultivator at the last moment. The willow sword in his hand pierced towards the great cultivator's eye for the 6th time. The great cultivator did not expect this little fellow to be so persistent. He could not react in time. Not only did his body, which was about to escape, not leave, he was forced to take a few steps back. It was these few steps back, whether it was intentional or not, that forced him into the 3 talents 5 elements Dao soldier formation. After taking a blow from the great cultivator, even though Lu Xiaoping had an 8,000-year-old willow body, his abdomen was almost smashed. The little child curled his lips and immediately cried loudly as he fell towards Zhenling's encampment on the ground. After evading the encirclement of the Dao soldier formation, the 2 great cultivators immediately turned around, wanting to open up a gap in the periphery to rescue the second great cultivator who was trapped in the formation. However, The Dao soldier formation formed by 40 to 50 core forging realm cultivators was not enough to deal with the wandering great cultivators. However, it could definitely defend against the great cultivators' frontal attacks. Moreover, after Tianfan and Tian Shui, the two Laozu, entered the formation, they quickly took over Li Tianru and Ji Tianshuan's positions as the main formation. Li Tianru and Ji Tianxian supported them from the side, causing the might of the three talents' five elements Dao soldier formation to increase by another level. While it trapped a great cultivator within, it occupied the sky above Junling's encampment and blocked the attacks from the other two great cultivators. Chapter 1270. The divine wills that swept across the sky and the surroundings of Junling Sect's encampment exclaimed in amazement. However, at this moment, Junling Sect's encampment beneath the Dao soldier formation suddenly emitted a rhythmic wave of spiritual qi, and it quickly spread to the surroundings. Soon, a large array shield that emitted a five-colored light soared into the sky, firmly protecting the entire Junling sect within it. At this critical moment, the formation of the Junling station was also formed. Screwed, who would have thought that even this sect would be screwed? The scattered divine senses of the cultivators from various sects who were hiding in the surrounding void to watch the show were once again filled with a new emotion. They were gloating. After all, the Dao soldier formation was made up of dozens of core forging stage cultivators. Faced with the partial siege of two great cultivators, although the formation shared the damage and increased the defensive power, the Junling disciples who were directly facing the two great cultivators still inevitably suffered injuries. Although it did not affect the operation of the Dao soldier formation for a while, as time went on, the formation would inevitably collapse under the internal and external attacks and harassment attacks of the three great cultivators. The Dao soldier formation descended slowly. Obviously, it needed to borrow the power of the station's defense formation. The defense formation, which was set up by spiritual master Mysterious Fox with the help of the Five Elements Ring and the reference of the Wuxing School's Five Elements formation, was naturally extraordinary. Once the Dao soldier formation returned to the station, with the power of the defense formation, the two great cultivators who were harassing and attacking from the periphery could only sigh helplessly. However, if the two of them retreated at this time, the second great cultivator who was trapped in the formation would obviously be captured alive. In desperation, the two of them could only attack the station's formation, hoping that the hastily built defense formation of Junling would have an irreparable flaw. However, before the two of them could do anything, a sharp sword whistle pierced through the sky and sounded from behind them. When the two of them turned to look, their expressions changed. A pair of flying swords had already cut through the void and went straight for the head of the great cultivator who was surrounded by black fog. "It's Lu Tianping." The great cultivator who was surrounded by black fog cried out involuntarily. He retreated as if he had seen a ghost. "Why the F***ck are you running?" On the other side, the great cultivator who had been attacking the formation barrier with him couldn't help but curse aloud upon seeing this. Unfortunately, the enemy's reinforcements had returned, and one of their own was fleeing as if possessed, so he naturally couldn't stay here for long. In the end, he had no choice but to retreat as well. However, Junling was not willing to give up after suffering such a big loss. At the same time, Lu Ping forced the Black Fog Great Cultivator to retreat with his sword. At the same time, Laozu of Tianshan also let out a roar and broke through the sky, directly striking the back of the last Great Cultivator who appeared. The Great Cultivator was stunned. Originally, he had underestimated the opponent because he was a mid-Dharma Laws stage cultivator. However, when he Dao Soldier was Zong, he was Mountain. He pulled out the jade belt from his waist and immediately turned it into a jade whip. Impressively, it was a first tribulation spirit treasure. After a crisp whip sound, the jade whip wrapped around the handle of the mountain axe, causing the forward momentum of the axe to slow down. The great cultivator took the opportunity to escape from the pursuit of the mountain axe. He seemed to be very relaxed. However, in the end, he did not dare to face the mountain axe head-on. In the end, Laozu of Tianshan could not do anything to this person. However, just as this person escaped the pursuit of the mountain axe, two exclamations sounded almost at the same time. "Wang Shiqing, how could it be you?" The great cultivator was shocked. When he turned around, he saw that the black fog around his companion, who was surrounded by black fog, had disappeared. The true face of Lu Shan was immediately revealed in front of the cultivators of Zhenling. The previous exclamation was made when the black fog around him was dispersed. However, the other exclamation was made by Lu Ping, who had used the netherwater sword to cut and dissolve the black fog around the cultivator while he was escaping, revealing his true face. The great cultivator surrounded by black fog was actually the second-generation cultivator of the Blue Sea sect, Wang Shiqing. Lu Ping remembered this person very clearly. When this person was captured by Lu Ping, his foundation was directly damaged, and there was no possibility of him improving his cultivation in this life. However, the Wang Shiqing who appeared in front of Lu Ping now had the cultivation of a late Dharma Laws stage cultivator. How could this not shock Lu Ping? This shock really caught Lu Ping off guard. After the third great cultivator got rid of Laozu of Tianshan, he grabbed Wang Shiqing and looked at the Dao soldier formation unwillingly. Then, the two of them turned into a gust of wind and flew out together, disappearing in the blink of an eye. Liu Tianyuan, Tian Tian, Lu Hai, Qin Yu, and Qin Gang rushed over. They saw Lu Ping and Laozu of Tianshan floating in the air outside the formation. Both of their faces were full of shock. The four of them could not help but feel their hearts sink. Tian Tian hurriedly went forward and said, "Senior brother Lu, the situation. How is the situation?" Lu Ping was stunned and hurriedly looked at the 3 talents 5 elements Dao soldier formation that was running in the formation. He forced a smile and said, Fortunately, we came in time." Seeing their strange expressions, Tian Tian knew that it was not the time to ask about this. He hurriedly called Liu Tianyuan to enter the 5 elements Dao soldier formation and immediately participated in the 3 talents 5 elements Dao soldier formation. This Dao soldier formation was the sect guarding formation of Zhenling. Almost all the disciples of Zhenling could control it with ease. Lu Ping and Laozu of Tianshan looked at each other, suppressed the shock in their hearts, and immediately entered the Dao soldier formation. Although Mara's army was frightened by Lu Ping's supreme magic power several tens of miles away, they did not retreat. On the contrary, when Mara pressed forward again, perhaps the gathered forces would be even stronger. Zhenling had to eliminate all hidden dangers before Mara's army arrived. Lu Ping's divine will swept across the sky. Lu Ping's divine will, which was flickering with green soul fire, was exposed without any reservation. His divine will, which was almost comparable to that of a pure yang cultivator, immediately swept up a whirlwind of divine will within a radius of several miles. All the cultivators hiding in midair were so frightened that they retreated. The divine wills that crisscrossed above Zhenling's station were instantly swept away. When Zhenling's divine will was united, the great cultivator trapped in the Dao soldier formation could no longer struggle, especially after Lu Ping and Laozu of Tianshan joined in. A great cultivator had become Zhenling's captive. While the great cultivator was busy, Lu Ping suddenly launched a sneak attack. Beams of sword light flew out of Lu Ping's fingertips and silently sank into the blood vessels around the great cultivator's back, completely blocking the circulation of his essential essence. The great cultivator's expression changed dramatically, and the Dharma idol in his core space was about to break out. Unexpectedly, a palm suddenly appeared on the back of his heart, and a copious amount of Zhenyuan seeped into his body, following the blocked blood vessels and completely sealing the space in his heart. If he tried to summon his Dharma idol by force, the space in his heart would definitely collapse without the support of his Dharma idol. The great cultivator panicked, and he did not dare to make the slightest movement. "That's right," Lu Ping said softly behind him. Then, he patted the back of the great cultivator's head and knocked him out. Then, he pointed a finger at the great cultivator's forehead. A green flame seeped into the great cultivator's head through his fingertip, and a look of pain flashed across the great cultivator's face. Lu Ping snorted coldly and pressed his palm on the great cultivator's chest again. A stream of dense purplish-blue essential essence was injected into the great cultivator's chest along with a faint roar. The great cultivator immediately spat out a mouthful of blood. "What's wrong?" Laozu of Tianshan asked curiously when he saw that Lu Ping was so cautious and even injured the great cultivator while he was unconscious. Lu Ping smiled and said, These great cultivators have too many tricks up their sleeves. It's impossible to guard against them. So, we might as well injure his core. Even if he still has some strange tricks up his sleeve, he won't be able to do anything with his current strength. Laozu of Tianshan's mouth twitched. He was very clear about the consequences of injuring his core. This could be considered as a death feud. However, when the great cultivator took advantage of the situation, he obviously didn't leave a way out for Zhenling. Since the great cultivator was captured by Lu Ping, Laozu of Tianshan couldn't say anything. However, he could feel that the current Lu Ping was less cautious than before, and more ruthless and overbearing. However, when he thought about Lu Ping's current strength and achievements, Laozu of Tianshan felt relieved. The truth of the cultivation world was always the one with the bigger fist. Lu Ping looked at Tianfan and Tian Shui, the two Laozu of Tianshan, and asked, "Are the two martial granduncles all right?" Tian Shui Laozu touched the bloodstain at the corner of his mouth and said, "It's fine. These are just some minor injuries caused by the turbulence of essential essence. After calming down, there won't be any major problems." Lu Ping nodded his head. Although the two Laozu of Tianshan no longer had the possibility of advancing into the great cultivator realm, their cultivation had become more and more profound. Even though they were suppressed by the two great cultivators earlier, they didn't suffer any serious injuries. A trace of worry flashed past Tianfan Laozu's face. "Let's see who this person is first." At this moment, Lu Ping seemed to have thought of something and said coldly, "Who else could it be?" He extended his hand and wiped the face of the great cultivator who had fainted on the ground. A slightly pale middle-aged cultivator's face was revealed. Liu Tianyuan and Tian Tian, who were bewildered earlier, seemed to have confirmed something. Liu Tianyuan said, "It's really them." Lu Ping looked at the two of them. Although Lu Ping's reputation had risen in Middle-earth, the ones who had truly traveled around Middle-earth were Liu Tianyuan and Tian Tian. In terms of the famous cultivators in Middle-earth's cultivation world, Lu Ping didn't know as much as the two of them. Tian Tian took a deep breath and said, "Supreme Shen Sect's Windrain Dual Whips. The one who escaped earlier should be the Wind Whip Han Wuya, and this one should be the Rain Whip Hua Wuyin." The Windrain Dual Whips are two of the Supreme Shen Sect's famous great cultivators. The Windrain Dual Whips in their hands are a treasure that is not inferior to a second tribulation spiritual treasure. Back then, the two of them joined forces and managed to escape from the seven Fan Laozu's hands. That's how they became famous in the cultivation world. In today's battle, it's obvious that the two of them were too arrogant, or perhaps they were unwilling to reveal their identities. Otherwise, if the two whips joined forces, it would be difficult for us to capture either one of them. Chapter 1271. Taishen Sect. This heavy name of the sect was like a huge rock pressing down on the hearts of many Zhenling cultivators, making it difficult for them to breathe for a while. This was a large, established sect that had been fighting with Tianxian sect for many years. Its strength was naturally not something that a large sect like Hutu sect could compare with. After all, they could force Tianxian sect to retreat all the way. Even if they had the support of a Holy Land, they would not have been used as a tool by a Holy Land if they were not strong enough. Lu Ping did not care too much about this. Taishen sect had tried to collude with Cunghai sect a long time ago and expressed hostility towards Lu Ping. In Lu Ping's opinion, this hostility was most likely because of the contact between Zhenling and Tianxian sect. Zhenling wanted to become a large sect, so it had to choose a large sect in Central Plains to build an ultra-long-distance transmission array. Whether it was Tianxian sect or Tianyu sect, it was a test for Zhenling. Whether it was Tianxian sect's old rival, Taishen sect, or Crystal Palace, which had been blocked by Tianyu sect from expanding its strength into Central Plains, they would not be indifferent to the possibility of these two sects receiving strong support from a large sect. These were serious tests that Zhenling had to face in order to rise. Even if Lu Ping had been in another large sect, he would have encountered similar situations. What he was more concerned about was Wang Shiqing, who was previously covered by the black fog. This person's original foundation had been destroyed by Lu Ping using a secret technique, but now he had a solid late Dharma cultivation. In just a short period of nearly 100 years, how Wang Shiqing had recovered his original foundation, but he had pushed his cultivation from the early Dharma stage all the way to the late Dharma stage. This was really incredible. After all, going through 2 consecutive thunder tribulations was no joke. Tian Fan and Tian Shui, the 2 Laozu, had clearly maintained sufficient vigilance towards Wang Shiqing's appearance. After all, the appearance of a single grand cultivator in the Northern Sea could be said to be a world-shaking event. However, before they came to the Northern Sea, the Azure Sea sect did not have any news regarding the appearance of a third grand cultivator. However, Wang Shiqing had suddenly appeared in the Middle Earth with the cultivation of a grand cultivator. If he were to return to the Northern Sea's cultivation world, it would definitely cause an uproar in the entire Northern Sea. When Lu Ping saw the strange expressions on the 2 Laozu's faces, he asked, "Martial granduncles, did you discover anything unexpected in your fight with Wang Shiqing?" After some thought, Ancestor Tian Fan said, "That's far too unbelievable, but now that I think about it, that Wang Shiqing did indeed give the 2 of us a feeling of déjà vu when we clashed earlier. I never thought he'd be a member of the Neptunian sect." Tian Fan and Tian Shui Laozu's suspicions had obviously disappeared after the other party revealed his identity as a Azure Sea sect cultivator. The 2 Laozu had been in the Northern Sea's cultivation world for close to 1,000 years. Naturally, they were very familiar with the Azure Sea sect's heritage. However, Lu Ping still had some doubts. He could not help but ask, "Martial granduncles, don't you feel that this Wang Shiqing's appearance is too strange? The growth of his cultivation is really too unbelievable. In just 100 years, he went from the early Dharma stage to the late Dharma stage." Tian Shui Laozu's expression was filled with hatred. She said unhappily, "It must be the Taishan sect playing tricks behind the scenes. They must have used some secret technique or shortcut. I wonder what kind of price Wang Shiqing will have to pay." Lu Ping still had some doubts. He said, "How could the Taishan sect have such a miraculous secret technique?" Tian Shui Laozu paused for a moment before saying, "Even if the Taishan sect doesn't have it, the Wuxing school behind them might not have it. These holy lands have a long history and deep heritage. Who knows what kind of secret technique they have in their hands? This time, you consecutively killed the Wuxing school's 2 great disciples. You have offended them greatly. Who knows, it might be the Wuxing school who is behind this." Although Lu Ping still had some doubts in his heart, what Tian Shui Laozu said was not without reason. Lu Ping could only suppress the doubts in his heart. At this time, Mara's army in the Qingming River had regrouped and attacked again. This was not the time for Lu Ping to worry about other things. The 3 talents and 5 elements great formation had already been formed, and the garrison's defense array had also been successfully built. This 5 elements great formation looked similar on the outside, but on the inside, it was different. Lu Ping was not afraid that the Wuxing school would be able to see through it. As long as he did not reveal the 5 elements ring, even Jin Chan Laozu himself would not know that the 5 elements great formation that Zhenling had set up was the Wuxing school's formation technique. Tian Shan Laozu asked again, "Then how should we deal with this Hua Wuyin? No matter what, he is still a hot potato, right?" Tian Fan and Tian Shui Laozu also did not know what to do. Lu Ping said straightforwardly, "Take away his storage artifact and his whip. Even if he wakes up, he will not be able to break free from the restriction disciple placed on him. Let's not bother with him for now. Let's talk about it after we get through Mara's attack." Just as Lu Ping and the others were preparing for the upcoming battle, the void outside the encampment trembled. The great cultivator from the Taishan sect who had escaped earlier suddenly appeared, causing a wave of nervousness in Jinling sect. However, after the great cultivator appeared, he hovered in midair and didn't make a move. Upon seeing this, Tian Shan Laozu and Lu Ping rose into the air and arrived in front of the person. Lu Ping stared at the person with an unfriendly expression, sizing him up. This caused Han Wuya to feel rather uncomfortable. He knew how powerful this third-generation great cultivator was. How many famous great cultivators in the Central Plains had already fallen at his hands? However, when he thought of the fact that the great cultivator from his own sect had become the other party's prisoner, he had no choice but to bite the bullet and come forward to negotiate with Zhenling. The great cultivators of the late Dharma Plain, the famous wind and rain dual whips, had fallen at the hands of a medium-sized sect, and one of them had even been captured. If news of this were to spread, wouldn't the Supreme Profound sect become the laughingstock of the Central Plains cultivation world? Moreover, the actions of the Supreme Profound sect this time were indeed a bit despicable. The reputation of looting a burning house was set in stone. Moreover, they were targeting a medium-sized sect, and if things went wrong, they would be suspected of colluding with Mara's army. This was really unreasonable. However, in his view, at this time, Junling was facing a great dilemma, and there was no reason for him to make another strong enemy. If he could pay a price to rescue his partner who had fallen into the other party's hands, it was not impossible. At least, it could save a little face for the Supreme Profound sect in the Central Plains. Thinking of this, Han Wuya Laozu smiled and went straight to the point. What will it take for you to release my brother Hua? Lu Ping did not wait for Laozu of Tianshan to speak. He looked up to the sky and laughed, as if he had heard a joke, and said, "The Supreme Profound sect secretly lured Mara to attack our sect's encampment, and then ganged up to attack our sect. Now you want us to release him? What kind of logic is this? Since when has the Supreme Profound sect become so domineering in the Central Plains?" Han Wuya's expression changed, and he said, "Don't slander us, sir. When we attacked, we did not know that Mara's army had arrived." Lu Ping said mockingly, "Do you think anyone will believe you? Why don't you go and explain to the various sects of the Central Plains?" Han Wuya laughed coldly, and said, "I'm afraid there is no need for me to explain. I'm afraid that your sect's midway trip this time will vanish like smoke in thin air." Han Wuya paused, and then said, "I'm afraid you still don't know, but Mara's army has increased again. An Azura has already brought 6 Jade Mara, 10 Blood Mara, and nearly 1,000 small and large Mara to meet up with the previous Mara team. At this time, they are not far from the encampment of your sect." Laozu of Tianshan's expression changed slightly, but he heard Lu Ping next to him say indifferently, "Sir, you also said that you have not colluded with Mara. Otherwise, how could you have investigated Mara's forces so carefully?" Han Wuya snorted coldly, and said, "The old man is not willing to talk to you. In short, as long as you can release my junior martial brother Hua, you can state whatever conditions you have." Lu Ping chuckled, but did not say anything else. Laozu of Tianshan, who was at the side, said, "That's fine. As long as you bring me that Wang Shiqing's head, we will release fellow Daoist Hua Wuyin. What do you think?" Han Wuya's expression changed, and he said, "Fellow Daoist Wang is not a cultivator of our sect, so forgive me for not being able to do this." Laozu of Tianshan also seemed to know that this matter could not be used as a bargaining chip, and so he said, "Since you have appeared now, I presume that you have some understanding of the predicament that our sect is currently facing, and you have made preparations. This is fine as well. Then, please lead the Azura in Mara's army away. What does fellow Daoist Han think?" Han Wuya's expression changed, and he could not make up his mind for a moment. If there was only one Azura, and Han Wuya joined forces, then Wang Shiqing might be able to temporarily hold it back. But at this moment, 2 Asuras were leading an army of nearly 3,000 Mara. If they attacked together, not to mention 2 great cultivators joining forces, even 4 great cultivators joining forces would not dare to say that they would be able to draw out one Azura from Mara's army. If they were not careful, then the entire army might be wiped out. Han Wuya's expression darkened, and he simply revealed his true intentions. He said, "Your sect should think about the consequences of offending my supreme mystery sect." Lu Ping, who was at the side, sneered, "It seems that your sincerity is limited. You can't say that." An unfamiliar voice came from the void not far from Han Wuya, and a cultivator in his 40s wearing a tall hat flashed out of the void. He said, "Brother Han naturally has sincerity, but your sect is too insatiable. After all, the Supreme Mystery Sect is a well-known large sect in the Central Plains, and is the backbone of the resistance against Mara's army. Your sect is only a poor, middle-sized sect. Relying on tricks to capture Brother Hua, you demand an exorbitant price, and this weakens the power of the cultivation world to resist Mara's army. Everyone, from the perspective of fighting against Mara, Do you think that the cultivation world should support a so-called North Sea sect, or a large sect of the Central Plains? Laozu of Tianshan said angrily, I didn't think that there would be such a sophistry like you in the Central Plains. Sophistry? The cultivator with the tall hat swept a disdainful glance at Laozu of Tianshan, and said, what I said is correct. The Central Plains is not a place where your North Sea sect can behave atrociously. In my opinion, this time, with Mara's counterattack, you, Junling, will not be able to resist it. Why don't you release Brother Hua, and then give this station to my sect? Then, Mara's army will be resisted by my sect, and you, Junling, will at least be able to retreat unscathed. What do you think? Chapter 1272. Feiyun Pavilion was another large sect that was quite famous in Central Plains. Fellow Chu Yun, you're right. Han Wuya clapped his hands and said, it's a small matter that you, Junling, can't stop the counterattack of Mara's army. If Mara's army opens up a gap in the encirclement that the cultivators of the various sects have painstakingly built, then it will be your sect's fault. At that time, I don't think your sect will be able to bear the condemnation of the cultivation world, right? If you let junior brother Hua out and hand this place over to Feiyun Pavilion to guard, the counterattack of Mara's army will definitely not be a problem. Furthermore, Junling won't lose a single soldier, so why not? The two of them echoed each other, vividly displaying the phrase sophistry. Even someone as cultured as Tianshan Laozu was dumbfounded by the two of them. Meanwhile, Lu Ping was even more infuriated by the two of them. The mocking smile on Lu Ping's face made Chu Yun Laozu of the Feiyun Pavilion feel embarrassed. He said, Brat, what are you so happy about? Don't think that just because you've defeated a few great cultivators that you don't know the immensity of heaven and earth. There are also differences in strength among great cultivators. Do you think that you can already run amok in the cultivation world of Central Plains? As they spoke, Mara's army had already reached the shore of Qingming River. Nearly 3,000 Mara's army, led by 3 Asuras, stopped about 1,000 feet away from Junling's encampment. Brat, this is your last chance. Let fellow Hua go immediately, and the cultivators of Feiyun Pavilion will immediately enter this 5 elements formation to reinforce your sect. Otherwise, you can just wait for your entire army to be destroyed. The ancestor of the Chu Yun sect said sinisterly. However, at this moment, it became a joint effort to resist the evil Luo army. He had forgotten that Junling sect wanted to remove the 5 elemental great formation and that their flying cloud pavilion would resist the evil Luo army alone. Of course, no matter which one it was, the encampment would not belong to Junling sect in the end. His here. Lu Ping still had a smile on his face, but no one could understand the words that came out of his mouth. What do you mean by coming? Brat, what do you mean by that? If you can't make the decision, call a few old fellows over. Han Wuya was more anxious than the Yun nation's Laozu. After all, his junior brother was still in the enemy's hands. If Junling couldn't hold on, Hua Wuyin would also die. Lu Ping chuckled but did not answer. Instead, he turned his head and looked at the back of Junling's camp. Han Wuya and Chu Yun Laozu seemed to have sensed something, and their expressions changed. They also looked in the direction that Lu Ping had turned his head. However, Tianshan Laozu was a little slower. When he turned around with some suspicion, a few firefly-like conveyance lights had already appeared on the horizon. Kid, are you the one who called for help? Lu Ping smiled without saying a word, but Han Wuya said fiercely, I want to see what kind of person you called. Who dares to save you in front of the old man? As soon as Han Wuya finished speaking, a loud laugh was heard from the horizon. Brother Lu, it's been decades since we last met in Tianxian City. I wonder if Brother Lu still remembers us brothers? Lu Ping hurriedly went forward and smiled. Brother Yun, you're treating me like an outsider. Hey, Brother Xiaoho, you're here too. Apologies for not coming out to greet you. Please come in. The person who came was Yun Jian, a 3rd-generation practitioner from the Tianxian sect who had survived the 3 rushing thunder swords. Back then, when Lei Jian and Lei Jian died tragically, Lu Ping only had time to save Yun Jian. Now, his cultivation had advanced to the Dharma stage. The other practitioner with a long sword on his back was also an acquaintance of Lu Ping. He was the fourth direct disciple of the Qianxian sect, the storm swordsman, Xiahou Wushang. He was also at the mid-Dharma stage now. Xiahou Wushang was not good with words, so he only nodded at Lu Ping and said, "I heard that Mara's army was attacking. Fortunately, I didn't arrive too late." Lu Ping cupped his hands in gratitude and said, "Thank you." Yun Jian said from the side, "Brother Lu, you're treating me like an outsider. If it weren't for your help back then, we wouldn't be alive." Lu Ping hurriedly declined, but Yun Jian seemed to have suddenly discovered something new. He looked at Han Wuya, who was hovering in the air, and said in surprise, "Oh, if it isn't Han Wuya, Senior Han. Why are you standing here? Could it be that you want to help Brother Lu's sect?" Even a fool could tell that Lu Ping and Laozu of Tianshan were confronting Han Wuya and Laozu of the Chu Yun sect. Yun Jian's words were just to annoy Han Wuya. Even though Han Wuya was a great practitioner and Yun Jian was only a third-generation direct disciple of the Tianxian sect, these two sects were already mortal enemies. Under the current circumstances, Han Wuya would definitely not dare to provoke the Tianxian sect when the battle with Mara was about to break out. What's more, Elder Seven Fan was one of the initiators of the attack on the Nine Shen Tower. Now that he was on good terms with Xiao Baiyu and the others, Han Wuya naturally did not want to offend them. Yun Jian had also found out about this, which was why he dared to provoke a great adept of the late Dharma stage. Han Wuya was furious, but under the circumstances where he could not fight, he would not give up his status and argue with a third-generation disciple. He could only vent his anger through his nose. Although the current strength of the Zhenling station was not weak, Xiahou Wushang was no weaker than Laozu of Tianshan, and Yun Jian's strength was comparable to that of Liu Qianyuan and Tian Tian. The arrival of these two people could be regarded as strong reinforcements for Zhenling, so everyone in Zhenling was naturally overjoyed. The most important thing was that although their arrival was nominally due to Lu Ping's life-saving grace, who could ignore the Tianxian sect behind them? Whether it was the Tianxian sect or the Feiyun Pavilion, when it came to the strength of their respective sects, they were undoubtedly inferior to the Tianxian sect. Therefore, when he saw Yun Jian and Xiahou Wushang rushing over to support them, Han Wuya did not feel anything, but Laozu of the Chu Yun sect, who was beside him, seemed to be a little uneasy. Although the Feiyun Pavilion was also a well-known large sect in the cultivation world of the central region, its strength was only comparable to the Tianxian sect. Compared to the Tianxian sect, it was undoubtedly much weaker. However, after welcoming Yun Jian and Xiahou Wushang into the station, Lu Ping did not return to the Five Elements formation. Instead, he and Laozu of Tianshan continued to hover in the air, facing the direction from which Yun Jian and Xiahou Wushang had come. Could it be that someone else was coming? Chu Yun Laozu could not help but feel a jolt in his heart. Indeed, what he feared had come. Another two rays of light broke through the air. Even Han Wuya felt that something was wrong at this time, and his expression began to change. "Are you the North Sea Water Sword Celestial Lu Tianping, who has recently become famous in the central region?" A soft voice came from the air, and Lu Ping was a little stunned for a moment. Obviously, this voice surprised Lu Ping for a moment. On the other hand, Laozu of Tianshan thought of something. Seeing the shock on Lu Ping's face, he hurriedly said, "Are you a fellow from the Tianxian sect? Zhenling Tianshan and martial nephew Lu Tianping greet you." Lu Ping, who was at the side, saw Liu Qianyuan hurriedly flying over from the encampment and immediately understood what was going on. An expression of amusement flashed across his face, but he immediately put on a smile and said, "So it's a senior from the Heavenly Moon sect. I am Lu Tianping, sorry for not going out to meet you." Two women dressed in palace clothes descended and stopped in front of Lu Ping and Laozu of Tianshan. One of the female practitioners was older, and her cultivation was already in the middle Dharma stage. She had a smile on her face, but her eyes were cold. Obviously, she was a proud person. Lu Ping could even feel an unapproachable aura from her body, especially when she looked at Liu Qianyuan, who was flying over from the side. There was even some displeasure in her gaze. However, the person who spoke earlier was not her. Instead, it was the younger-looking female cultivator beside her. Although this female cultivator could not be considered a beauty, she was gentle and delicate. Her cultivation was also in the middle Dharma stage. From Lu Ping's point of view, if these two were the third-generation cultivators of the Heavenly Moon sect, then they would definitely be among the top direct disciples. The two female practitioners bowed to Laozu of Tianshan and greeted Lu Ping. As expected, they were the third-generation disciples of the Tianxian sect. At this time, Liu Tianyuan also hurriedly rushed over. Seeing the other female practitioner beside the gentle female practitioner, he was slightly stunned, and an uneasy expression flashed across his face. Only then did he say, "Senior Sister Chan Yu, Junior Sister Chan Xiong, I didn't think that the two of you would also come." Lu Ping saw that Liu Tianyuan's expression was slightly awkward when he arrived, and that Junior Sister Chan Xiong's face was also red. It was obvious that the "didn't think" that Liu Tianyuan said was only directed at the slightly older Senior Sister Chan Yu. He could not help but find it somewhat funny. As expected, that Senior Sister Chan Yu said coldly, "I only came under orders. You probably already knew that Junior Sister Chan Xiong could come, so there is no need to pretend to be so fake." This sentence made Liu Tianyuan feel very awkward. Seeing this, Lu Ping, who was at the side, hurriedly said, "The arrival of these two senior sisters is undoubtedly a timely help. Senior brother Tianyuan, why don't you quickly invite these two senior sisters into the station to rest for a while?" Liu Tianyuan patted his head as if he suddenly realized something, and hurriedly said, "Quickly invite them in, quickly invite them in." The three of them returned to the station together. Lu Ping smiled at Laozu of Tianshan, who was at the side, and said, "I have to congratulate Martial Uncle." However, Laozu of Tianshan did not seem very happy, and instead said, "Everything should go with the flow. Some things cannot be forced." Han Wuya, who was at the side, laughed coldly and said, "Not bad, you even managed to seduce the four beauties of Heavenly Moon. This disciple of your sect is very good at living off women." Anyone could see that there was something fishy going on between that Junior Sister Chan Xiong of the Heavenly Moon sect and Liu Tianyuan. However, the difference between the two of them was too obvious. Whether it was in terms of cultivation or status, Liu Tianyuan could not compare with that Junior Sister Chan Xiong. Previously, Laozu of Tianshan did not seem very happy about this, and it was likely that he had also thought of this. However, Lu Ping was not worried. Liu Tianyuan's natural endowments were not bad, and he was also someone who was willing to improve. Moreover, he had previously refined the Dharma soul left behind by Tienkang Laozu. Advancing to the mid-Dharma stage was already a sure thing, and there was a high possibility that he could even advance to the late Dharma stage and become a great adept in the future. As for the status of the two of them, it was not that they could not make up for it. Now that Zhenling had taken the last step to enter a large sect, he was only lacking one late Dharma adept. Lu Ping did not take Han Wuya's sarcasm to heart, but Chu Yun Laozu, who was at the side, remained silent this time. This was because he saw that Lu Ping and Laozu of Tianshan were still hovering in the air outside the station. Did this not mean that reinforcements had arrived for Zhenling? Chu Yun Laozu seemed to vaguely feel that this time, the Feiyun Pavilion was going to be humiliated together with the Taishan sect. As expected, not long after the two direct disciples of the Heavenly Moon sect arrived, several streaks of light once again appeared in the sky. A loud laugh once again rang out in the air. "Brother Lu, have we come too late?" Lu Ping smiled slightly and said, "You're not late, you're just in time." The beams of light disappeared, and Xie Tianyang, Sang Yu, Su Jin, as well as Qing Hu, Qing Lang, and Qing Hu appeared at the same time. This time, Han Wuya and the two Laozu of the Chu Yun were not just shocked, but their stomachs were spinning. When Lu Ping saw Su Jin, he hurriedly said, "I didn't expect Brother Su to come too." Su Jin smiled and said, "It's boring staying in the sect station. I heard from sixth brother that Brother Lu is going to have a good show here, so I specially came over to see what is going on. I hope Brother Lu and the elders of your sect will not blame me for being rude." Laozu of Tianshan smiled at the side and said, "This time, the matter of our sect has troubled all of you. Tianshan thanks all of you for your help." Su Jin, Xie Tianyang, and Sang Yu repeatedly said that they did not dare. At this moment, a woman flashed out from behind Sang Yu and said with a charming smile, "Brother Lu, do you still remember me? Lu Ping was slightly stunned. When he saw Sang Yu's slightly unnatural expression, he immediately remembered the female cultivator of the spirit beast sect who had taken a fancy to Lu Xiaohai at the river source. He smiled and said, "Isn't this Miss Wu Yinglan? I didn't expect you to also come to help this time. I am very grateful." Previously, Lu Ping had only sent Qinghu and the other two to ask for help from Xie Tianyang and Sang Yu. He did not expect that the Heavenly Moon sect and the Tianxian sect would also send their disciples over. However, this was not a bad thing. At least this time, with the strength of Zhenling and the reinforcements from Mara's counterattack, their chances of not losing the station were greatly increased. Su Jin, Xie Tianyang, and Sang Yu were all outstanding practitioners of the third generation. They were also the heirs of the Ziyang Palace and the Empyrean walkers of the Spirit Beast sect. They were all prominent figures in the world of cultivation. Although Wu Yinglan's cultivation was slightly lower, she was also at the early Dharma stage. Furthermore, she was the only daughter of the great practitioner of the Spirit Beast sect, Wu Tianxing, the Empyrean walker of the previous generation, Wu Yinglan, so her status was also extraordinary. In addition, Qinghu and the other two were also experts among the practitioners of the same level. This time, it could be said that Zhenling's ability to resist Mara's counterattack had greatly increased. As everyone exchanged greetings, Xie Tianyang saw Han Wuya and Chu Yun Laozu, who looked a little uneasy. These two were prominent figures in the world of cultivation, so Xie Tianyang and the others naturally recognized them. Are Senior Han and Senior Chu Yun also here to help Brother Lu's sect this time? With the help of these two seniors, I think our chances of defending this time will be much higher. Whether Xie Tianyang really did not know the inside story or was doing it on purpose, his words made the two of them feel extremely awkward. Chu Yun Laozu, who was at the side, did not even think about it. He hurriedly laughed and said, "The old man is just passing by." He was passing by and revealed to Zhenling the number and scale of Mara's army's counterattack. Other than that, there is nothing else. With the help of the rising stars of the cultivation world, I think there is no need for the old man to meddle. The old man still has other matters to attend to, so he has to leave. Yes, his leaving. Chu Yun Laozu's hurried departure caught Han Wuya off guard. However, his junior brother was still in the hands of the other party. In front of these direct disciples of the Holy Land, Han Wuya did not have the courage to threaten Zhenling. He could only hover in the air, not knowing whether to advance or retreat. He felt very awkward. Chu Yun Laozu's hurried departure made Xie Tianyang and the others a little puzzled. Seeing the suspicious gazes of Xie Tianyang and the others, Lu Ping smiled and said, "This is not the place to talk. Let's go to the station and rest for a while. I'm afraid there will be a fierce battle later, and I will need your help then." Sang Yu was from the Spirit Beast Taming sect and was also an Empyrean walker. The cultivators of the Spirit Beast Taming sect liked to hide their identities and travel around the world, so they knew a lot about the secrets of the cultivation world. When she saw Han Wuya and Chu Yun Laozu hovering outside Zhenling's station, she seemed to have guessed something. After hearing what Lu Ping said, she smiled and said, "This time, we came for this fierce battle. It's rare for Brother Lu to personally ask for help, so we naturally have to do you a favor." Su Jin was also a Linglong person. He laughed and said, "That's right, that's right. This is a rare opportunity. With Brother Lu's achievements in the future, I'm afraid you won't give anyone the chance to owe you a favor anymore." When Han Wuya saw the direct disciples of the Purple Sun Palace, Spirit Beast Taming Sect, Heavenly Moon Sect, and Heavenly Shen Sect coming to help one after another, he naturally knew that all his plans had failed today. At this time, he finally made up his mind to leave. However, he was still one step behind Chu Yun Laozu. Just when Lu Ping welcomed the various reinforcements into the station and looked at Han Wuya with a smile, Han Wuya turned around to leave. Unexpectedly, the space around him suddenly became sticky, and a voice sounded in his ear, asking, "Where are you going?" Han Wuya was shocked, and the qi all over his body shook in an attempt to break free from the shackles. Unexpectedly, it was better if he didn't move, but once he moved, the shackles around his body became even tighter. This made Han Wuya even more shocked. Could it be that there was an unknown master in Junling? After all, to be able to imprison a great cultivator like him without him knowing was not something that an ordinary person could do. An old man holding a green jade flute suddenly appeared beside Han Wuya. Lu Ping, who was previously smiling, hurriedly went forward to greet him and said, "I didn't expect you to come as well." The old man smiled and said, "The old man's injuries have not yet healed. You promised before that if the old man wants to recover, this matter naturally falls on you, kid." Han Wuya's heart had long sunk to the bottom. The person who came was none other than one of the 13 pure young Laozu who had called for the world of cultivation to gather at the 9 profound tower to besiege Mara's army. He was Lin Yu Laozu, who represented the forces of the Central Plains individual cultivators. Lu Ping smiled and said, "Don't worry, ancestor. I've already gathered most of the spirit herbs required to concoct the pure yang stasis removal pellet. I'm just waiting for ancestor's arrival and I can start concocting the pellet." Lin Yu Laozu smiled and said, "Rest assured, old man. If before, old man still had some doubts, but this time I heard from fellow Daoist Xiao about your reputation in the overseas cultivation world. I didn't expect that your alchemy skills have already reached such a level. You can actually be mentioned in the same breath as the Fire Phoenix clan's alchemy grandmaster, Yang Wujiu, who has a great reputation in the Central Plains cultivation world." Lu Ping said modestly, "Junior does not have any virtue or ability to be mentioned in the same breath as Senior Yang." Lin Yu Laozu did not dwell on this topic. Instead, he turned to look at Han Wuya, who had been imprisoned by him, and said, "This time, Mara's counterattack is no small matter. The old man is injured and can't do much. Since you've come, you should also contribute. After all, with a great cultivator like you overseeing this battle, the weight is very different." Han Wuya Laozu wanted to cry but had no tears. Chapter 1273. This time, Mara's counterattack is no small matter. It is a pity that the old man is injured and unable to intervene. Since you are here, you should help out. It is better than giving the Taishen sect the reputation of not helping a dying sect. Lin Yu Laozu's words made Han Wuya want to cry, but he had no tears. This time, the Taishen sect could be considered to have suffered a double loss. His own brother was still in the hands of others, and this time, he had fallen into the hands of Lin Yu Laozu and was forced to work for Junling. At that time, the Taishen sect would definitely become the laughingstock of the entire cultivation world. Unfortunately, when people under the eaves, they had to bow their heads. Lin Yu Laozu's level of practice was not considered powerful among the pure young Laozu, but the secret techniques that he had inherited from the ancient times were not to be taken lightly. The foundation of this set of inheritance was completely based on the practitioner's divine will, and half of Lin Yu Laozu's strength was in this. Unfortunately, when Lin Yu Laozu received this set of inheritance, he was already a Dharma adept. His divine will was almost fixed, and it was extremely difficult to improve on the original foundation. Even so, Lin Yu Laozu had relied on this set of secret techniques to finally push his level of practice to the pure yang stage. Now, although Lin Yu Laozu could not use this set of secret techniques to deal with pure yang adepts of the same level, it would not be difficult to deal with a great adept of the late Dharma stage. At the same time that Han Wuya was imprisoned, Lin Yu Laozu used a secret technique to seal his divine will, but did not use any of his inner yuan. However, when Han Wuya was awake, he was horrified to find that he could not control his own body at all, and a strange but unparalleled power of divine will had directly invaded his core space, subduing his Dharma power in the blink of an eye. In an instant, Han Wuya Laozu's physical body, cultivation, and magic had been used by Lin Yu Laozu, and Han Wuya was now just a puppet in Lin Yu Laozu's hands. What a marvelous skill! Lu Ping saw that Han Wuya, a great adept, was like a puppet following Lin Yu Laozu's commands. While he was praising Han Wuya, he felt a chill run down his spine. Lin Yu Laozu smiled slightly and said, "This time I just caught him off guard. It is not easy to control a great adept, and this kind of opportunity is not common. With the old man's level of practice, the most he can control is a mid-Dharma adept, but what use is a mid-Dharma puppet to the old man?" However, Lu Ping didn't think much of it. The secret technique was clearly extraordinary, and the heritage Lin Yu obtained in the past wasn't simple at all. Lin Yu Laozu saw Lu Ping's drooling expression. Laozu smiled slightly and said, "What do you think? Do you want to learn it?" Lu Ping came back to his senses and smiled bitterly. "It would be a lie to say that I don't want to learn such a secret technique." Lin Yu Laozu laughed loudly and said, "You saved the old man's life, and you owe him a great favor for refining the pure young blood stasis removal elixir. What harm is there in giving this ancient technique to you?" Lu Ping's eyes lit up, but he was still a little hesitant. "Really?" Lin Yu Laozu sighed and said, "This inheritance was the cause of the Yi Yun sect's destruction, but it is not the Yi Yun sect's own inheritance. The old man did not violate the sect's rule of not divulging the sect's inheritance to you. Speaking of which, from the time the seventh patriarch opened the sky until 10,000 years ago, the cultivation world mostly discussed and learned from each other. Even exchanging inheritances was not uncommon. Therefore, there were often amazing figures among the loose cultivators. However, in the past 10,000 years, the sects have become more and more powerful. They have collected the world's inheritances for their own use. Now that the power structure of the cultivation world has been set, the sects have become more and more powerful, while the loose cultivators' situation has become more and more difficult. No matter what, this inheritance cannot be passed down among the loose cultivators. And the reason why I gave it to you was not because the old man felt like it, but because this inheritance is closely related to the practitioner's divine will. The stronger the divine will, the more powerful the inheritance. It's a pity that the old man's divine will had already been fixed. Otherwise, he might not be weaker than those pure young practitioners from the Holy Lands. As for your divine will, it is extremely unique. You are only at the mid-Dharma stage, but your divine will is second only to that of a pure young adept. You are the perfect candidate to inherit this ancient secret technique. Only such a person would be able to unleash the true power of this ancient technique. When Lu Ping saw that Lin Yu Laozu was determined to pass this inheritance to him, he said, "I wonder what this secret technique is called. Does Elder need me to do anything?" Lin Yu Laozu shook his head and said, "This inheritance is actually just a set of 3 great secret techniques. These 3 great secret techniques are called Shadow Flow, Sealing Image, and Stealing Aura. The 3 combine to form the great secret technique Slaying Spirit. But those who are hit by it are rarely able to escape from it so quickly. It's a pity that when masters fight, they are always on guard against each other. It's not easy for this secret technique to be effective. But once it is effective, it will definitely be a fatal blow." Hearing this, Lu Ping nodded. If this kind of heaven-defying secret technique could be used at will, it would not be called heaven-defying. But even so, once it was successfully cultivated, it would definitely be a killer move. At this time, Lu Ping saw Lin Yu Laozu crooked his finger, and Han Wuya started walking towards the 2 of them. However, Lu Ping noticed that at this time, Han Wuya's gaze seemed to be a little more lively, and his body seemed to be trying very hard to escape from something. It was just that it did not work, and he continued walking towards the 2 of them. Lin Yu Laozu explained, "This secret technique only seals the divine will and essential yuan of a cultivator, but it does no harm to the cultivator himself. Therefore, it is very easy for someone to escape from the state of being cast. At this time, the caster needs to continuously increase the power of the seal." After a pause, Lin Yu Laozu continued, "Back then, this also had something to do with the caster's own level of attainment. With the old man's divine will, it was only a matter of time before he was able to trap a great cultivator. If it was a mid-Dharma adept, perhaps the old man would not have needed to care about him for an entire day." When he saw Han Wuya walk over, Ancestor Lin Yu tapped the center of Han Wuya's forehead, and then he slapped his palm down towards Han Wuya's chest. "Go." The struggle of the original consciousness that had emerged from Han Wuya's physical body was once again suppressed by Lin Yu Laozu. Although he looked like an ordinary person, his entire person felt like he had killed a portion of spiritual qi. Outside the station, under the leadership of a few blood Mara, the Mara army had already begun to launch a probing attack on Junling. However, with the protection of the defensive formation and the 3 talents and 5 elements formation, The disciples of Zhenling did not need to rely on the strength of reinforcements to repel the invading Mara army. They also annihilated nearly 100 big and small Mara in one fell swoop, and a bloodshorer was also seriously injured. Currently, the two great practitioners, Lin Yu Laozu and the controlled Han Wuya, were in charge of Zhenling's station. However, Lin Yu Laozu was injured, and unless it was absolutely necessary, he would not intervene. At this time, this pure yang was here to deter the practitioners from the various sects who wanted to take advantage of the situation. The mid-Dharma adepts were Tianfan, Tian Shui, Tianshan, Lu Ping, Chan Yu, Chan Xiong, Xiaohe Wushang, Sang Yu, Su Jin, Xie Tianyang, and Qing Hu, and the early Dharma adepts were Liu Tianyuan, Tian Tian, Ji Tianxian, Li Tianru, Yun Jian, Wu Yinglan, Qing Lang, and Qing Hu. Although the strength of Zhenling's side might be slightly inferior to that of Mara's army, with the protection of the station's great array, it was not impossible for them to block the attack of Mara's army. It was a pity that Hua Wuyin's base had been severely injured and his cultivation sealed after he had been captured by Lu Ping. Otherwise, if he had been handed over to Lin Yu Laozu to use the ancient secret technique, perhaps Zhenling would have gained another great help in the battle. This time, the siege of Mara's army by the various sects concerned the opening of the Seventh Patriarch's Way altar and several secret realms. Therefore, after the various sects had obtained the approval of the 13 pure Yang Laozu, they had distributed the photographic stones to every disciple who had participated in the battle. The records of the number of enemies killed by each disciple would be compiled and tabulated. This would serve as a reference for the allocation of the quota for the various sects to enter the secret realms after the battle. Although Zhenling was the first to bear the brunt of the counterattack of Mara's army, it had to be said that this was an excellent opportunity to increase Zhenling's military achievements. Of course, the prerequisite was that they naturally had to block the attack of Mara's army. In fact, as long as Zhenling can display the strength to completely block the counterattack of Mara's army, then this Mara's army will inevitably face a siege from the various sects' cultivators. Lin Yu Laozu analyzed the pros and cons of this battle to the crowd and said confidently. Tianshan Laozu agreed. In other words, the various sects are now observing our sect's strength from the sidelines. Once our sect withstands Mara's counterattack, then the various sects will inevitably rush forward to snatch the military achievements. Ji Tianxian scolded, "These Central Plains sects are so shameless. We took the risk to block Mara's army, but they want to pick up the fruits of our labor from the sidelines." Tianfan Laozu said helplessly, "There's nothing we can do about it. They will come under the banner of rescuing our sect and be bold and confident. In reality, they will indeed snatch a lot of our sect's military achievements, but it is also a fact that they can reduce the burden and casualties of our disciples." Ji Tianxian was still indignant. He said in a low voice, "This feeling of being taken advantage of is really unpleasant." At the side, Lu Ping said with a smile, "No matter what, we have started the first battle to encircle and annihilate Mara. In the future, we will have a firm foothold in the Central Plains. Moreover, encircling and annihilating Mara will not be decided in a single battle. This is a long and drawn-out battle. Today, others have come to our encampment to take advantage of us. In the future, when we run to their doorstep and kill Mara, they naturally won't be able to say anything. There will be plenty of opportunities." As expected of Ji Tianxuan's good friend, Lu Ping was able to see through his thoughts with just a few words. As soon as he said this, Ji Tianxian was already chuckling to himself, as if he had already made up his mind to do so. As they spoke, the second attack of Mara's army had already arrived. Under the lead of the 5 Jade Mara, over 1,000 Mara's army charged towards the encampment once more. The battle had escalated. Chapter 1274. Seeing Mara's army charge over again, Lu Ping was about to make a move, but unexpectedly, he was blocked by his two good friends, Sang Yu and Xie Tianyang. Xie Tianyang said, "I heard that you guys already had a battle outside the Qingming River. Leave it to us this time. It'll be good for you, the number one of the third generation, to see our cultivation achievements over the years. This number one of the third generation title is not that easy to obtain." Sang Yu also laughed, "That's right, we are very unconvinced. Coincidentally, we have the reflection stone to accumulate battle merits, so let's compete fairly. Since Brother Lu has already made a move, then don't make a move again this time. If you are interested in competing, then everyone can make a move. The two echoed each other, but the target of their provocation was naturally not the Zhenling cultivators. Speaking of the Zhenling, only Lu Ping could be taken seriously by these Holy Land sects. The two of them were naturally targeting the Sky Profound sects Wind and Cloud swordsman Xiahou Wu Shong, as well as the Heavenly Moon sects Chan Yu and Chan Xiong. Lu Ping knew the thoughts of his two good friends and was moved. However, he also knew that since things had reached this point, Lu Ping naturally couldn't refute the thoughts of his two good friends. In any case, the one who benefited was Zhenling. They were all the best of the third-generation direct disciples of their respective sects, so naturally, they were all proud and arrogant. Xiahou Wu Shong did not speak, but the long sword on his back trembled. The two senior and junior sisters of the Heavenly Moon sect giggled, and the aura around their bodies did not seem to be at a disadvantage in the slightest. To the side, Su Jin had long since become impatient and said hurriedly, "Let's go, their core forging cultivators have already fought. What are we still doing here? There are only 5 Jade Mara coming up this time, whoever snatches them gets it." As soon as he finished speaking, Su Jin had already arrived outside of the encampment's great formation. His body was instantly covered by a layer of formation barrier. Su Jin let out a sound of surprise and shouted, "What a good formation." Finished speaking, the Ice Brocade sword trembled and charged into the midst of Mara's army. Immediately, the heads of 2 great asuras flew high into the air. Chan Yu of the Heavenly Moon sect snorted delicately and said, "Making a move against 2 great asuras, what's so great about being a direct disciple of a holy land? It's not like it will be counted as battle achievements." When she spoke up to hear, Chan Yu's voice stopped because she saw Su Jin turn around and launch a surprise attack after he killed 2 great asuras with his sword, and he caught a blood asura off guard, causing one of its arms to fly into the sky. Killing a blood asura would be counted as a battle achievement. Chan Yu didn't have time to say anything else. She called out to her junior sister Chan Xiong beside her, and the two of them leaped out of the station's defensive formation as well, charging towards Mara's army. After these 2 seniors and junior sister charged out, Liu Qianyuan hesitated for a moment, then followed them out of the encampment. Seeing this, Qing Hu and the other 2 naturally did not show any weakness. Although Qing Hu was a non-affiliated practitioner, she was not completely without a foundation. Otherwise, her level of practice would not have been able to reach the mid-Dharma stage. Seeing that Xie Tianyang and the others had about 3 generations of mid-Dharma adepts, she naturally had to go out and compete with them. Xie Tianyang winked at Lu Ping, then said, let's go. They've already made the first move, we can't fall behind anymore." Sang Yu was about to follow, but unexpectedly, Wu Yinglan also wanted to go out. Sang Yu's expression immediately darkened. Although Wu Yinglan was also an early Dharma adept, in Sang Yu's eyes, she was the weakest. Now that this lady was going out, he would definitely follow by her side to ensure her safety. If he lost even a hair on her head, he would be hunted down by Wu Tianxing and Lao Zu. Under such circumstances, how would he have the energy to fight others? Xie Tianyang was naturally gloating from the side. Without waiting for Sang Yu to react, he had already charged out of the encampment. Sang Yu had no choice but to team up with Wu Yinglan and leave the encampment. Li Tianru and Ji Tianxian continued to control the 3 talents and 5 elements formation, firmly guarding the encampment. When Mara's army surged forward, Li Tianru and Ji Tianxian reached out their hands, and 2 spiritual-level bronze bells flew out of the encampment. Clang! Clang! 2 crisp sounds rang out, and the hundreds of large and small Mara flying at the front immediately swayed, causing the entire attacking Mara army to be thrown into chaos. Li Tianru and Ji Tianxian took the opportunity to command the formation to charge out of the encampment, killing as many of the large and small Mara that were attacking the protective walls of the encampment as possible. Then, when Mara's army reacted again, they did not linger and immediately retreated into the encampment, relying on the protective walls of the encampment to resist the tide-like attacks of Mara's army. These 2 bronze bells were replicas of the 2 sea bells that Zhenling had successfully replicated over the years, according to the method provided by Lu Ping. However, the concentrated spiritual materials needed to make this kind of magic treasure were too rare. Even though Zhenling had occupied the majority of the few mineral veins discovered in the North Sea over the years, it was already commendable to upgrade these two replicas to the level of spiritual level magic treasures. In addition, Lu Ping also had a replica of the sea bell that had reached the level of a spiritual level magic treasure. In all of Zhenling, there were only these three. It was a pity that Xionglu Laozu did not come to the Central Plains with them this time. Otherwise, with the help of the Real Sea Bell, Zhenling's achievements in encircling and suppressing Mara would be even more glorious. However, the Sea Bell, a spiritual treasure, had too many implications. If it was exposed in the Central Plains, it was unknown whether Zhenling could keep this spiritual treasure. Just in case, Xionglu Laozu did not bring the Sea Bell to the Central Plains this time. Even so, the replica of the Sea Bell still attracted the attention of Lin Yu Laozu. This magic treasure copper bell is interesting. It seems to have some special restraints on Mara. It's a pity that its power is a little lacking, and its grade is too far off. Otherwise, it would be a treasure that can restrain Mara. Lin Yu Laozu saw through the nature of these two copper bells with a glance. He pondered for a moment and said, "These two magic treasures must not have been easy for you to obtain. However, it's best to upgrade them, but don't use them too much in front of others. Otherwise, it'll be bad if other sects covet them." Lu Ping smiled bitterly and said, "Of course I want to upgrade the quality of these two magic treasures. However, the spiritual materials needed to refine these two magic treasures are too rare, and the difficulty of refining them is far higher than magic treasures of the same grade. The sect I'm in has used all its resources to gather spiritual materials, and two master refiners have meticulously refined them. So far, I've only refined these two magic treasures. Moreover, after promoting their quality to the spiritual level, I don't have the strength to go any further." Lin Yu Laozu looked at the two magic treasures in surprise and said, "It's really that difficult? Tell me what spiritual materials are missing. Let's see if the old man can help." Although Lin Yu Laozu was an independent cultivator, he was a pure young Laozu after all. His accumulation for more than 1,000 years was naturally extraordinary. It was normal for him to have a few kinds of precious spiritual materials in his hands. Hearing this, Lu Ping was also a little moved. He immediately reported the precious spiritual materials needed to refine the vast sea bell. Earthfire pure gold, heavenly wind iron catkins, formless jade copper, immersed silver essence. There were more than 10 kinds of spiritual materials that were rare in the cultivation world. Lin Yu Laozu could not help but laugh bitterly when he heard this. He said, "Each of these spiritual materials can be said to be treasures of heaven and earth. They are all treasures that can be used to refine spirit treasures. Moreover, they need such a large amount. If these 10 kinds of treasures are taken out, they can be used to upgrade 7 or 8 spirit treasures. But if all of them are gathered on this copper bell, it can only be upgraded to a spiritual treasure." Lu Ping said helplessly, "That is indeed the case. However, if we can gather all of these spiritual materials, there is only one treasure left to upgrade it to a spirit treasure. As long as we have this treasure, it won't be a problem for this copper bell to be upgraded in the future." Lin Yu Laozu had long been a little discouraged after listening to Lu Ping's introduction. If there were only 1 or 2 kinds of spiritual materials, Lin Yu Laozu could still gather them. If there were more than 10 kinds of spiritual materials, and they were all in such large amounts, he felt that even a sacred ground would be disheartened if they wanted to do it. When he heard Lu Ping say that there was still one treasure missing, he casually asked, "What treasure is it?" "Sound stone." "Sound stone?" Lin Yu Laozu seemed to be deep in thought, but Lu Ping's expression changed. Zhenling had long grasped the method to refine the vast ocean bell. Although the precious spiritual materials inside were a headache, it was not that they did not exist in the cultivation world. It was just that it was abnormally difficult to gather them. However, this soundstone was something that Zhenling had never heard of before. In reality, Lu Ping vaguely seemed to have some impression of this treasure. However, this familiarity came from the impression that Lu Ping had obtained when he absorbed and refined Fei Tian Laozu's pure young soul. Fei Tian Laozu's pure young soul had been baptized by time for thousands of years, and the spiritual memories inside had already been lost. Although this sound stone sounded familiar, he really did not know what it was. Lu Ping carefully asked, "Senior, do you know what this sound stone is?" Lin Yu Laozu nodded and said, "Sound stone. This item should exist in the 7th Patriarch's Tao altar. It was the treasure that was used to forge the Tao altar when the 7th Patriarch opened the altar to give a lecture." 7th Patriarch's Tao altar? This time, it was Lu Ping's turn to be shocked. That was the place where the 7th Patriarch opened the altar to give a lecture to the cultivators of the world. It was the holy land of this world, and the sound stone actually existed in this place. When the 7th Patriarch opened the altar to give a lecture, his words were simple and profound. Just a few words could make people have an epiphany. Even his tone could give people a shock. However, the 7th Patriarch's power was so great that it was impossible for the people listening to the 7th Patriarch's lecture to comprehend everything. Usually, after listening for a short while, they would be immersed in their own epiphany and unable to extricate themselves. Naturally, no one could listen to the 7th Patriarch's lecture in its entirety. This was also the reason why the 49 true teachings of the 7th Patriarch were passed down to the world. In order to record the 7th Patriarch's lecture in its original form, the cultivators of the world used the sound stone to forge the 7th Patriarch's Tao altar. This sound stone could preserve the original sound of the 7th Patriarch's lecture and continue to echo until now. Although the sound has become fainter and fainter, every time the 7th Patriarch's Tao altar opens, the cultivators who enter will comprehend the sound of the Tao altar, hoping to find one or two of the 7th Patriarch's true voices to increase their cultivation or to comprehend a secret technique. Chapter 1275. In this battle against Mara, the battle credit calculation was extremely strict. Ordinary practitioners would only be able to count the number of Mara kills that were at most one level lower than their level of practice. This meant that for a mid-Dharma adept like Lu Ping, if he wanted to count his battle credit, he had to kill at least a blood Mara. If it was a big Mara that was equivalent to the core forging stage, to a mid-Dharma adept, it would be as easy as chopping vegetables. There was no point in doing so. Of course, for early Dharma adepts like Liu Qianyuan and Ji Tianxian, killing a big Mara that was equivalent to a late core forging stage could also be counted as a battle credit. It was just that compared to killing a blood Mara, the difference was like heaven and earth. However, it was still much higher than a mid-Dharma adept killing a blood Mara. By the same token, if a mid-Dharma adept killed a Jade Mara that was equivalent to a Jade Mara of the same level, the battle credit he would receive would definitely be higher than if a Great Dharma adept killed a Jade Mara. All in all, this method of calculating battle credit took into account practitioners of different levels of practice. At the same time, it also took into account the relative difficulty of calculating battle credit. However, Lu Ping did not care too much about Xie Tianyang and the rest's fair challenge. Lu Ping took out his imaging stone and looked at it. Previously, when he was above the Qingming River, he had used the changing seas into mulberry fields because of his sudden enlightenment. In one fell swoop, Lu Ping had killed a Jade Shura, a Jade Demon, 5 Blood Shuras, and 2 Blood Demons. In addition, he had severely injured a Jade Shura and 3 Blood Mara, and killed more than 600 big and small Mara. It was a pity that these achievements did not count towards Lu Ping's battle credit. Even so, with these achievements, Lu Ping did not believe that Xie Tianyang and the rest would be able to catch up to him in this battle. After finding out the whereabouts of the sound stone from Lin Yu Laozu, Lu Ping was even more determined to go to the 7th Patriarch's altar. If he wanted to go there, he had to be among the best in this battle against Mara. At the very least, he had to be among the best among the mid-Dharma adepts. There had been rumors that this battle against Mara would open up the battle credit leaderboard. Lu Ping had just received confirmation from Lin Yu Laozu, and the battle credit leaderboard had already been opened when Mara had attacked Zhenling's base. There was no overall leaderboard for the battle credit leaderboard. The battle credit leaderboard was based on the different levels of practice of the adepts, which would result in different points for killing Mara. Therefore, The leaderboard was only based on the different levels of practice of the adepts, and Lu Ping naturally only paid attention to the leaderboard for the mid-Dharma adepts. According to the rules of the battle credit leaderboard, a mid-Dharma adept would naturally not receive any battle credit for killing Mara or Little Mara. However, killing a Blood Shura would be worth 3 points, and a Blood Demon would be worth 5 points. Killing a Jade Shura of the same level would be worth 10 points, and a Jade Demon would be worth 15 points. If one was able to kill an Azura of a higher level, it would directly increase by 20 points. However, if it was a Sky Demon, it would be a whole 30 points. Lu Ping made a rough estimate of the battle above the Qingming River and realized that he had still received 50 points. Although now, because of the 7th Patriarch's altar, Lu Ping now had an additional motivation to fight for battle credits. Due to the previous agreement he had with his companions, Lu Ping could not directly fight. However, the way the battle credit leaderboard was calculated for early Dharma adepts was different. This was because of the huge gap between a big Mara and a Blood Mara. Although early Dharma adepts could still receive battle credits for killing a big Mara, which was equivalent to a late core forging adept, regardless of whether it was a big Shura or a great demon, the battle credit would only be 1 point. However, if early Dharma adepts were able to kill a Blood Mara of the same level, the points would become 10 points for a Blood Shura, and 15 points for a Blood Demon, which was basically the same as how a mid-Dharma adept would receive points for killing a Blood Shura of the same level. Similarly, when an early Dharma adept killed a Jade Mara of a higher level, they would also receive 20 points and 30 points respectively. As for the higher level Asuras and heavenly demons, although early Dharma adepts basically had no chance of killing these beings, the battle credit leaderboard still listed the reward points for them. That was, if an early Dharma adept killed a Blood Shura 2 levels above him, an Azura would receive 40 points, and a Sky Demon would receive 60 points. The same principle also applied to late Dharma adepts. If Jade Mara died at their hands, they would only receive 30 to 50 points. However, if someone completed a cross-level battle, they would receive 10 or 15 points for the points they earned. In reality, this was also a deliberate move by the 13 pure young adepts when they came up with the battle credit leaderboard. The reason was simple, and that was, every time Mara increased his level of practice, the increase in his abilities would often far exceed that of a human adept of the same level of practice. Therefore, the 13 pure young adepts did not approve of anyone taking the risk to challenge a strong practitioner like Mara. In reality, this was also a deliberate move by the 13 pure young adepts when they came up with the battle credit leaderboard. The reason was simple, and that was, every time Mara increased his level of practice, the degree of his ability would often far exceed that of a human adept who had the same level of practice. These 13 pure young adepts did not approve of anyone taking the risk to challenge a strong practitioner like Mara. Among the Mara adepts whose level of practice was comparable to the Dharma adepts, Mara of the same level was often stronger than human adepts because of his spiritual treasure. Those who could fight a Mara of the same level of practice were usually the best of the best among human adepts of the same level of practice. At this time, the battle outside the station was already in full swing. When Lu Ping looked over, he saw that the 3 mid-Dharma adepts, Xiahou Wushang, Chan Yu, and Chan Xiong, were barely able to fight a Jade Shura to a draw. This also showed that the 3 of them were strong among the same level of practice, and they were worthy of being adepts of their respective sects. Compared to the 3 of them, Green Fox was much weaker. She had tried to challenge a Jade Shura on her own, but the Jade Shura had the upper hand. She had no choice but to call for Green Tiger and Green Wolf's help, and only then did she have the upper hand in the battle against the Jade Shura. And Su Jin and Xie Tianyang's abilities were undoubtedly stronger than Xiahou Wushang and the other 2. Even if the 2 of them each dealt with a Jade Shura, they could still do it with ease. And Lu Ping could see that Xie Tianyang's abilities were even slightly stronger than Su Jin's. Sang Yu wholeheartedly wanted to compete with people of the same type, but he now had a grandaunt by his side. Wu Yinglan was only at the early Dharma stage, and her abilities were barely satisfactory, but it was not an easy task for her to take on a Blood Shura alone. Sang Yu could only escort her along the way. However, in this way, he had seized the opportunity to kill a Blood Shura and severely injure a Blood Demon. Compared to the others, he was the first to achieve results. When Lu Ping saw that his side wasn't in a disadvantageous position, he felt relieved. After all, there were still Tian Fan and Tian Shui, the two Laozu experts on the battlefield. When the two of them worked together, they were equivalent to the existence of a grand cultivator. As long as Mara's army didn't send out any asuras, Mara's army wouldn't have any problems charging forward. Lu Ping simply ran to the array disk of the 5 elements formation to talk to the black fox. When the black fox saw Lu Ping, she was very surprised. "Why are you here? Aren't you going to fight?" Lu Ping chuckled and told her about the arranged battle, then asked, "How is it? How's the control of the 5 elements formation?" The black fox immortal rolled her eyes at him and said, "The Wuxing School's formation detailed explanation is a formation passed down from Wuxing School for tens of thousands of years. It's extensive and profound. How can it be so easy to control? The 5 elements formation in the encampment this time is just borrowing the effect of the spiritual treasure, the 5 elements ring, to simplify the construction of many originally complicated and profound formations, without weakening the formation's power. Under normal circumstances, it wouldn't take such a short time to set up such a formation." As the two of them spoke, they entered the location of the 5 elements formation. On the formation disk, which had a circumference of 30 feet, there were dozens of top-grade spirit stones embedded in it, and in the center of the formation disk was the 5 elements ring, which was shining with a 5-colored brilliance. Lu Ping looked at the formation disk, where the formation masters of his sect would replace the top-grade spirit stones that had exhausted their spiritual qi from time to time. He could not help but ask, "The consumption of top-grade spirit stones is so fast. Do the sect have enough spirit stones?" The black fox said, "Before setting up the formation, Marshal Granduncle Tian Shui gave me 300 top-grade spirit stones. It took me 50 to set up the formation and maintain its operation. But now that the battle is going on, the consumption of spirit stones will increase. But 300 top-grade spirit stones are enough to last for a while." Lu Ping nodded and said, "Although there are a few places that are not used for gathering spirit, they are not spiritual veins. Otherwise, we can greatly reduce the consumption of spirit stones." The black fox also said, "There is nothing we can do about it. Our sect's foundation is not as good as those famous sects. It is rare to be able to take out 300 top-grade spirit stones in one go. But who would have thought that Mara's counterattack would be so fast, and he is even coming for our sect?" Lu Ping said, "I have a few spiritual gathering pearls with me, but it is too late to use them to cultivate spiritual veins. Now, the fastest way is to find 1 or 2 spiritual veins and bring them to the station. Or we can just separate a water vein from the Qingming River." "Separate water vein?" The black fox was a little surprised and said, "This is a secret technique that only a few sacred lands and famous sects can master. How can we do it?" Lu Ping lowered his head and muttered to himself. He took out a storage bag and said, "There are 100 top-grade spirit stones in here. Just in case." The black fox was a little unhappy and said, "This is a matter for the whole sect. How can you use your own things?" Lu Ping smiled and said, "This is not for the sect, but for you. You can use it as you see fit." At this time, the black fox realized the number of 100 top-grade spirit stones. Although she knew that her man was powerful, he could easily take out 100 top-grade spirit stones. She thought that even celestial phenomenon Laozu would not be able to do it so easily. She could not help but ask, "Where did you get so many top-grade spirit stones? Do you have enough for yourself? Why don't you just leave 50 and take the rest for yourself?" Lu Ping wanted to show his wealth to the black fox, but he was afraid that he would scare her, so he just smiled and said, "You can take it. I don't lack these." After saying that, Lu Ping stretched out his hand and threw the Linglong wine cauldron onto the 5-element ring in the center of the formation plate. Chapter 1276. Lu Ping had killed the water ape spirit of the treasure cauldron of heaven and earth in the branch of the Qingming River at the foot of Luoxin Mountain. The Linglong wine cauldron had benefited a lot from it. Although Lu Ping had been suppressing her from summoning the second thunder tribulation, the Linglong wine cauldron had become more useful. Although the 5-element ring could maximize the circulation of the spiritual power stimulated by the spirit stone, the Linglong wine cauldron would undoubtedly increase the efficiency of the big formation. Moreover, the Linglong wine cauldron was a treasure that could be used to control the earth veins and gather spiritual qi. Using it to suppress the big formation, I could gather as much spiritual qi as possible for one's own use. However, Lu Ping was thinking about how to separate a water vein from the Qingming River for his own use. Zhenling's station was close to the Qingming River. If he could draw out a branch of the water vein, even if it was only a small one, it could save a lot of resources for Zhenling's practice. However, since ancient times, the secret technique of drawing water veins had only been in the hands of a few sanctums and famous sects, and it was an existence that was not passed down. Moreover, it was not a simple matter to use it. One only had to look at the effort that the 5-element sect had put into stealing the Nether River's veins to know. Lu Ping hesitated to ask Lin Yu Laozu for advice again. It was just that Lin Yu Laozu had given him the inheritance of the supreme magical power, the rare spiritual materials, and the secrets about the 7th Patriarch's Taoist altar. Lu Ping always felt that there was a scheme behind Lin Yu Laozu's generosity. Although Lu Ping did not think that Lin Yu Laozu's scheme could bring any harm to Zhenling, this kind of favors made Lu Ping somewhat flinch. Moreover, Lin Yu Laozu himself might not know the secret method of drawing out the water vein. Actually, it's not too difficult to separate a branch from the Qingming River. Lu Ping was taken aback. Only then did he smack his head as he recalled that there was an existence in the core space that could be said to have been born in the hands of Daoist Chan ever since he passed the third lightning tribulation at the foot of Luoshin Mountain and became a pure yang spiritual treasure. Perhaps because he had to consume the gains from the advancement, the mantis had been hiding in the scissors and did not show itself. For a moment, Lu Ping had forgotten about the biggest trump card in his hand. The 2 halves of the spiritual treasure was not just a water-dissolving talisman. Back then, the Wuxing school had tried every means to find it, in order to make a cut in the water vein of the Qingming River so that they could separate a water vein. It was precisely because they failed to find it in the end that the Wuxing school had to plan for hundreds of years and use other secret techniques to successfully draw out a water vein from the Qingming River. Now that the spiritual treasure had been cut in half, although it had fused the other half of the water transformation talisman together, its ability to separate the water veins would not disappear because of this. On the contrary, in the eyes of the mantis, cutting off a branch of the Qingming River was at least much easier than before. Lu Ping suppressed the joy in his heart and asked in a low voice, "Although you can separate a branch from the Qingming River, what do you need me to do? Will the separation process cause a lot of noise?" Although the 2 halves of the spiritual treasure could separate the water vein, it did not mean that Lu Ping could immediately put it into action. First of all, a pure yang spiritual treasure was not that easy to control. Even if it could be controlled, it might not be able to fully exert the power of the pure yang spiritual treasure. It also depended on who was in possession of the 2 halves. Back when it was only a second tribulation spiritual treasure, the pure yang Laozu of Wuxing school was already able to use it to separate the water vein. Now that it was a pure yang spiritual treasure, if it was in the hands of Lu Ping, it would not be able to fully exert its potential, and he would not be able to separate the water vein either. After the mantis had become a pure yang spiritual treasure, its spiritual intelligence had obviously increased greatly. After a moment of silence, it said, if it were an ordinary mid-dharma adept, it would naturally be impossible to control a pure yang spiritual treasure. But back then, the water ape said that the technique you practiced was one of the 7 authentic techniques that Jiao Daoren had left behind. Coupled with the fact that your foundation is unbelievably strong, perhaps you can use 40 to 50% of the power of your original body. If that's the case, it should be enough. But doing so will obviously cause a lot of noise. At least the changes in the water vein of the Qingming River will not be able to hide from high-level adepts. It's up to you to find a way to confuse them. Lu Ping nodded and said, if that's the case, no matter what, I have to give it a try. It's just that after separating the water vein and bringing it to the base, it will still be a troublesome matter. It won't be easy to do it without attracting attention. The mantis chuckled and said, that will depend on how good the little beauty is. Linglong, who had been placed on top of the 5 elements ring by Lu Ping, popped her head out of the wine cauldron and made a face at Lu Ping. She said, "Don't worry, big brother. After Linglong absorbed the water ape's spiritual treasure, her own body has become more useful. It will not be difficult to bring the water vein here. And Linglong can also suppress the water vein in the base for a period of time. After the sect gives up on this base, the water vein can return to the main water vein. That way, no one will suspect that we have stolen the water vein of the Qingming River." Lu Ping was overjoyed. He said, "That's good. We just need to find the right time, and we can try it secretly." The battle outside the base continued. If it was a one-on-one fight, Xiahou Wu Shong and the others had the upper hand in the fight against the Jade Shura. As for Su Jin and Sang Yu, if they were given enough time, they could kill a Jade Shura. However, in this chaotic battle, the evil Luo army had the advantage in numbers. Although Zhenling's sect had some experts, they only had a total of 40 to 50 disciples. It was already not easy for them to defend their base. Naturally, they couldn't provide any help to the heirs of the various sects who were in the midst of the evil Luo army. So, although Xiahou Wu Shong, Su Jin, and the others were fighting against the Jade Shura, they were actually fighting against many people. They had to be careful of other Mara's interference. If someone like Mara intervened, they might be at a disadvantage. And there was also the Jade Demon. Shura and Xiumo were in the same boat. If a Shura or a Xiumo's power was equal, then when the two worked together, their power was not as simple as 1 + 1. Xiahou Wu Shong and the others were able to fight the Jade Shura without being at a disadvantage, even when they didn't have the upper hand. It was obvious that the people from the Holy Lands were not to be underestimated. Su Jin's cold ice silk sword was about to lock down the Jade Shura in front of him. The cold sword air made it difficult for the Jade Shura to move. Su Jin believed that he would only need a moment to injure the Jade Shura. But at this time, a bloodthirsty and violent presence invaded Su Jin's mind. Su Jin's face changed, and he quickly used his mind to block the soul-devouring god power. But the flying sword in his hand couldn't help but slow down. The Jade Shura, who had been trapped, suddenly found an opening, and attacked. It broke Su Jin's sword formation. He saw that the points were flying away, and he had to start all over again. Su Jin looked in the direction of the soul-devouring god power, and he saw a jade demon hiding behind 2 Jade Shura. It was using its weird soul-devouring god power to harass everyone, and it was helping the other Jade Shura fight with the others. The 3 Jade Mara had come from the Mara army to join the fight after everyone started fighting. Luckily, Tian Fan and Tian Shui, the 2 Laozu from Zhenling's side, quickly joined the fight. They managed to keep the 3 Jade Mara occupied, but they couldn't avoid the Jade Demon's support. Luckily, Su Jin had injured one of the Blood Shura at the beginning of the fight, and when he was fighting the Jade Shura, he took the chance to leave the fight and stab the Blood Shura. He got a point. Although it was only 30%, at least he didn't go back empty-handed. Sword cultivators were afraid of returning empty-handed after unsheathing their flying swords. Some extreme sword cultivators even had the principle of seeing blood when their flying swords were unsheathed. Although Su Jin didn't stop there, he didn't want to stand there without gaining anything. Compared to him, the Jade Shura that Xie Tianyang was facing was much worse. From the beginning of the fight, Xie Tianyang had targeted the Jade Shura. Even with the Jade Demon's support, Xie Tianyang clearly had a way to resist the Jade Demon's soul-devouring god power. At this time, the Jade Shura's companion spirit treasure was almost destroyed by Xie Tianyang, and there were a few sword wounds all over its body. Su Jin sighed. This 6th junior brother's cultivation was getting higher and higher. Although he was the 3rd heir of the Purple Sun Palace, in terms of power, Xie Tianyang was already above him. Sang Yu had originally planned to give up on this opportunity to compete for battle merits because of Wu Yinglan. With his help, Wu Yinglan had even successfully killed a blood demon. This was a kill against someone of the same level, so it was full of battle merits. However, the excited Wu Yinglan was immediately ambushed by a blood demon because she had left Sang Yu's rescue range. Then, she was injured by a blood shura. In a rage, Sang Yu escorted Wu Yinglan back to the base, then turned back and killed his way into Mara's army. He forcefully took a blow from a Jade Shura and killed the Blood Shura that had injured Wu Yinglan. However, he was immediately engaged by the Jade Shura from before, so he knew that he couldn't get many points now. Xiahou Wushang's situation wasn't good either. Under the entanglement of a Jade Shura and 2 Blood Mara, he was at a disadvantage. However, with Yun Jian supporting him from the side, he wasn't completely suppressed. It was a pity that Yun Jian's cultivation was limited, so he couldn't give Xiahou Wushang too much support. On the other hand, Chan Yu and Chan Xiong seemed to be in a much better situation. These two had mid-Dharma level cultivation, and in terms of power, they might be slightly weaker than Xiahou Wushang. However, the two of them didn't fight alone. When they fought together, they had the upper hand. Chapter 1277. Since Su Jin, Xie Tianyang, and the other 2 Jade Shura had managed to fend off the 4 Jade Shura, the 2 sisters decided to join forces to fight against the only Jade Mara among the 5. Without the protection of the 4 Jade Shura, the other 3 Jade Mara that had rushed over were blocked by Tian Shui and Tian Fan, the 2 Laozu, so the Jade Demon simply gathered 3 Blood Shura to assist it from the side. With that, it was able to fend off the joint attack of the 2 sisters. However, Liu Tianyuan had already rushed over. Originally, Liu Tianyuan had only wanted to help the 2 sisters snatch battle merits. Seeing that they were entangled, he immediately launched a sneak attack on one of the Blood Shura. After Liu Tianyuan had fused with the Dharma soul left behind by Tian Kang Laozu, his cultivation had improved greatly. Among cultivators of the same level, his strength might not necessarily lose to cultivators of the same level from the large sects. Now that he had launched a sneak attack on the Blood Shura, he was able to heavily injure the Blood Shura in one fell swoop. After a series of fierce attacks, a battle merit of the same level was about to fall into his hands. Chan Yu, Chan Xiong, and Liu Tianyuan's group of 3 appeared to have a much easier time. However, the ones who were truly the best at snatching battle merits were Qing Hu and the other 2. This time, when Mara's army attacked, the first 5 Jade Mara were snatched by the proud and arrogant cultivators of the large sects. Qing Hu and the other 2 were unable to compete with them. As for the 3 Jade Mara that had rushed over later, they were blocked by the 2 Laozu, Tian Fan and Tian Shui. Qing Hu and the other 2 were still unable to interfere. Feeling helpless, the 3 of them could only join forces to deal with the bloody Mara. This time, the 3 of them managed to obtain quite a number of battle achievement points. Green Fox was a mid-Dharma adept, and her abilities were not weak to begin with. With Lu Ping's help, she had obtained the Thieving Divine Axe from the Thieving Heavens treasure trove, and her abilities had increased tremendously. Although she was no match for Xiahou Wushang, Chan Yu, Chan Xiong, and the other heirs of the major sects, she had a one-sided advantage against Blood Mara. In addition, she had Green Wolf and Green Tiger, who were both strong early Dharma adepts, by her side. After a series of battles, 3 Blood Asuras had fallen at the hands of the 3 of them. Furthermore, Green Wolf and Green Tiger had intentionally allowed the points of these 3 Blood Asuras to fall to Green Fox. In reality, if the points had fallen to Green Wolf and Green Tiger, because they were early Dharma adepts, their points would have been higher. However, it was clear that the 2 of them were not optimistic about their chances of obtaining battle achievement points. Instead, they were willing to work for Green Fox. The battle around the Zhenling station was still in full swing. Under the leadership of Ji Tianxian and Li Tianru, close to 50 Zhenling core forging adepts operated the Dao soldier formation and relied on the protection of the station to firmly block the attacks of Mara's army. Although Mara's army had an absolute advantage in terms of numbers, because of the various Dharma adepts outside, Mara's army did not receive any help from the high-level Mara when they surrounded and attacked the formation. However, even so, Mara's army still caused some casualties to the Zhenling disciples. Although Li Tianru and Ji Tianxian had already done their best to save them, the operation of the Dao soldier formation required the cooperation of tens of people. It was inevitable that there would be gaps, and Mara's army would be able to take advantage of them. At this point in the battle, 4 of the Zhenling core forging disciples had already fallen, and more than 10 people had suffered injuries of varying severity. Among them, 5 people had no choice but to temporarily leave the operation of the Dao soldier formation because their injuries were more serious. However, this time, the attack of close to 1,000 Mara of various sizes had already been killed by the Dao soldier formation. Before Mara's flames of arrogance could even rise, it was once again extinguished. As the battle progressed, the morale of the Zhenling soldiers became higher and higher. On the other hand, the morale of Mara's army had been worn down by the continuous casualties. This time, Mara's army's attack did not make any progress, causing the Azura behind to be extremely furious. A fierce roar could be heard, and one of the 3 Azura finally couldn't hold back and wanted to attack. In the encampment, Lu Ping's expression changed, and he hurriedly rushed out from the encampment's array disc. However, he saw that Han Wuya and Tianshan Laozu had already stepped out of the encampment's array. Tianshan Laozu was holding on to the second tribulation spiritual treasure, mountain-splitting axe, while Han Wuya was holding on to 2 jade whips. He had also taken Hua Wuyin's jade whip. These 2 first tribulation spiritual treasures were like Tian Shui and Tianfan Laozu's wind and snow dual fans. They were originally a set. Now that the wind and snow dual whips were in Han Wuya's hands, their strength didn't decrease, but increased instead. Lu Ping looked at Lin Yu and Laozu. However, he saw Lin Yu and Laozu making a gesture to calm down. Lu Ping knew that the current situation hadn't reached the worst, so he didn't participate in the battle. Unexpectedly, the Azura let out a fierce roar, causing Zhenling's army to panic. However, it was a signal to retreat. The Azura's sudden appearance was originally to restrain Zhenling's army, allowing Mara's army, which was tangling with Zhenling's army, to retreat smoothly. Jade Mara and Blood Mara, who were entangled with the others, took the opportunity to retreat. Very quickly, they gathered together and retreated. The numerous cultivators on Zhenling's side wanted to rush forward and leave 1 or 2 Azura behind as battle merits. However, facing the gathered Mara's army, as well as the Azura that came to support them, they were all worried and didn't dare to chase after them. For a moment, Chan Yu, Chan Xiong, Xiahou Wushang, Su Jin, and Sang Yu, who were fighting Jade Mara, retreated. Chan Yu was so angry that she directly killed a blood Azura that was being suppressed by Liu Qianyuan, forcibly snatching 3 points from Liu Qianyuan's hands, causing Liu Qianyuan to smile bitterly. Tian Fan and Tian Shui, the 2 Laozu, who were able to block 3 Jade Mara's attacks, had already done their best. Now that Mara had retreated, the 2 of them let out a sigh of relief. Xiahou Wushang, Su Jin, and Sang Yu saw that there was no hope of stopping the Jade Shura. They originally wanted to turn around and kill a few Blood Shura, but they didn't succeed. Only Qing Hu and the other 2 were stronger than the Blood Mara, so when Mara's army retreated, they took the opportunity to kill a Blood Shura. The 3 of them rushed forward, and naturally, the Blood Shura was no match for them. In the end, it was killed by Qing Hu's axe. Her imaging stone showed that her battle merits had reached 14 points. Among them, only Xie Tianyang was chasing the Jade Shura that he was fighting, but in reality, he was also chasing the Jade Shura towards Mara's army. Everyone turned pale with fright. Just as they were about to step forward to stop him, it was already too late. They heard the Azura in the distance roar. It stretched out its hand and grabbed. A giant hand of spiritual energy slapped towards Xie Tianyang's head. Seeing that Xie Tianyang was about to be hit by the spiritual chi hand, the space around him began to shake because of the descent of the spiritual chi hand. It was obvious that the Azura's attack wanted to kill Xie Tianyang. The shaking space had cut off Xie Tianyang's path of retreat. At this critical moment, 2 crisp sounds came from the void. Han Wuya, who was hundreds of feet away, suddenly made his move. 2 whip shadows crisscrossed through the air, cutting off half of the giant hand made of spiritual energy in one fell swoop. However, the remaining half of the palm still enveloped Xie Tianyang. Seeing that Xie Tianyang was about to die, the usually calm and collected ancestor of Tianshan suddenly let out a roar. The mountain-splitting axe flew out of his hand and instantly arrived above Xie Tianyang's head. It drew a semicircular arc and completely shattered the remaining half of the giant spiritual energy palm, allowing Xie Tianyang to escape from danger. At this time, there was a scream. The Jade Shura, who had been chased by Xie Tianyang, was hit by the flaming sky sun sword. Her whole body was on fire, and there was a scream coming from the fire. Xie Tianyang let out a long sigh of relief. His back was soaked in cold sweat, and he didn't dare to stay any longer. He turned around and flew back to Junling's camp. Su Jin came to help him. When the two of them saw each other, they were scolded by Su Jin. Xie Tianyang just laughed and didn't say anything. He just thanked Laozu of Sky Mountain for helping him. In fact, when Mara's army was retreating, it was the best time to kill the Jade Shura that Xie Tianyang was suppressing. Because all of the Mara were retreating, and the blood Mara that had been harassing Xie Tianyang had retreated, the Jade Shura was now alone and helpless. Xie Tianyang was eager to make a contribution, so he naturally did not want to give up this fleeting opportunity. For a moment, he forgot that there was an Azura coming to rescue him not far away. If Han Wuya and the Celestial Mountain Patriarch tried their best to save him, Xie Tianyang would probably have to pay with his life. That Azura stopped attacking after missing his first strike. Instead, he retreated with the Mara army, and everyone else returned to Junling sect's encampment. Xie Tianyang saw that no one else had managed to kill the Jade Mara other than him, and the fear he felt earlier was long forgotten. He immediately became arrogant. Show them all. Let's see how many points you have," Xie Tianyang shouted. He wanted all the mid-Dharma adepts who had agreed to fight this time to show their kill records. He had killed a Jade Shura, which was 10 points. Xiahou Wushang and Chan Xiong had nothing. Chan Yu had 3 points, but it was the Blood Shura that she had taken from Liu Tianyuan. Su Jin had also killed a Blood Shura, so he also had 3 points. Sang Yu had killed a Blood Demon, so she had 5 points. Xie Tianyang saw that everyone was a level lower than him, and his whole aura changed. He was like a true adept from a holy land, which made Su Jin laugh bitterly. "Brother Liu, didn't you also have a battle with the evil Luo army before? Show us your points and let us have a look." Although Liu Tianyuan and the others were not qualified to participate because they were early Dharma adepts, this did not stop them from seeing the results of the fights. However, when they saw Xie Tianyang challenge Lu Ping, Liu Tianyuan, Qin Yu, and Qin Gang all had strange expressions on their faces. However, Xie Tianyang was too excited to notice their expressions. Seeing Xie Tianyang's provocation, Lu Ping smiled and said, "There's no hurry. There's still one more person you haven't fought." "Who?" Xie Tianyang chuckled and said, "Who else?" Lu Ping pointed at Green Fox and said, "Huh. How many?" Cyan Fox chuckled softly as she handed her photographic stone to Xie Tianyang. The number of points she had accumulated was clearly displayed on it, 14. Chapter 1278. Xie Tianyang immediately yelled at the sight of the 14 accolades on the Azure Fox imaging stone, "That's impossible." Lu Ping smiled and said, "Why not? Just take a look at the recording on the stone and you'll know." Xie Tianyang still did not believe it. He took Green Fox's imaging stone and said, "I noticed that I was the only one who killed the Jade Shura in this battle. None of you did. How could you surpass me?" Lu Ping and Green Fox smiled but did not say anything. Green Wolf and Green Tiger looked at each other, waiting to see Xie Tianyang make a fool of himself. The 3 Blood Shuras had a total of 9 points, and the Blood Demon had 5 points. That was a total of 14 points. Xie Tianyang even carefully looked at the recording of how Green Fox had killed the 4 Mara Shuras. "Cheating. You guys are cheating. It's one thing for a mid-Dharma adept to kill the Blood Demon Luo, who was 1 level lower than you, but you even teamed up with 2 early Dharma adepts and gave the last hit to you. No wonder your score is higher than mine. I can't accept this." Xie Tianyang pounded his chest and stamped his feet, but the others all burst into laughter. Green Fox giggled as she snatched the imaging stone back from Xie Tianyang's hands. "Who can we blame for this? You all were too quick to act. You divided up a few Jade Demons right away, and will be looking for another Jade Demon to fight against. Are you all willing to give it up?" Xie Tianyang was exasperated, but when he saw Lu Ping's carefree smile, it was as if he had found a straw to clutch at. He hurriedly said, "Brother Lu, we've seen Sister Qing Hu's battle achievements. It's time for you to show us your points." We were outnumbered and outnumbered, that's why we couldn't get more points. How many points did you get when you fought against the demon Luo army? Even Sister Qing, who has more points than you. Don't tell me you can't even beat me, old Xie, he. Lu Ping laughed as he looked at Xie Tianyang. Brother Xie, are you sure you want to compete? Xie Tianyang was not confident. It was not just Xie Tianyang, the other Holy Land's heirs were the same. Although all of them were prideful and wanted to compete with Lu Ping, they would not have agreed to the accumulated points challenge earlier. However, each of them knew very well that this North Sea Water Sword Immortal was someone who had even defeated several great cultivators. No matter how indignant they were, they really did not have the confidence to completely defeat a great cultivator. This gap was not something that could be bridged just by being indignant. Although Xie Tianyang wasn't confident, it was still a joke between good friends. He continued to shout, "Stop talking nonsense and show us. What's wrong? You don't dare. Are you trying to trick us?" Xie Tianyang was even trying to go at Xie Tianyang. Although the others did not say anything, they looked very eager. Clearly, they also wanted to know Lu Ping's accumulated points. Lu Ping also chuckled and gave Xie Tianyang a look that said, "Don't regret this." Then he took out his own imaging stone. Everyone swarmed over, and they saw a despairing number on Lu Ping's imaging stone. 50. Xie Tianyang immediately cried out, "No way." Sang Yu, who was beside him, was also shocked. "That's too fake. You were going to stop Mara's army, but you were outnumbered. Did you mean that Mara's army just stood there and let you kill them?" Not only the two of them, but the others were also looking at Lu Ping strangely. 1 Jade Shura, 1 Jade Demon, 5 Blood Shuras, and 2 Blood Demons. Such a result made everyone look at each other in bewilderment. On the side, Xie Tianyang opened the imaging stone to record the entire process. He only saw Lu Ping waving his hand, and a large number of demonic Luos were turned into dried corpses that fell from the sky. For a moment, everyone was shocked. Xie Tianyang even muttered, "So cruel, so cruel." Even Qin Yu and Qin Gang, who had personally witnessed Lu Ping's art of changing seas and mulberry fields, felt a chill run down their spines when they saw Lu Ping's peerless divine ability again. But everyone saw something else from the imaging stone. Lu Ping had always been a swordsman in the world of practice. Even now, Lu Ping was like the sun in the sky on the Central Plains. People called him the North Sea Water Sword Immortal. But in the process of killing so many Maras, the imaging stone didn't show Lu Ping's swordsmanship. It was obviously some other kind of power. But wasn't Lu Tianping a swordsman? Had Lu Tianping been hiding his true power all this time? This person's attainment in swordsmanship was already so high. Just what level had his true power reached? Was the strange power shown by the imaging stone a display of his true power? Everyone looked at Lu Ping with complicated gazes. They had not been able to achieve the desired result when they were outnumbered. They had felt a little regretful at first, but when they saw the shocking scene shown by Lu Ping's imaging stone, they realized that Lu Ping had been in a much more serious situation than they had expected. Xie Tianyang and the others were all proud and arrogant people. After seeing everything that flashed in the imaging stone, they had no choice but to admit that Lu Ping's true strength was probably much higher than they had estimated. The gap between them and Lu Ping was also clearly much larger than they had imagined. Mara's army had just dispersed, but no one knew if they would attack again in the next moment. Although everyone had made a ruckus because of the arranged battle, they still knew what was important. After they split up, they began to use the spiritual qi that the Zhenling camp could barely gather to recover the vital qi in their bodies so that they could deal with the battle that could happen at any time. Although Lu Ping had not participated in the battle just now, he did not want to disturb everyone, so he left. Unexpectedly, Xie Tianyang stopped him. "I have to thank Senior Lin Yu. Han Wuya must have intervened because of him. If it wasn't for him, I might have lost my life at the hands of that Azura." Lu Ping shrugged and said, "Can you find him now?" After the Azura appeared, Lin Yu Laozu suddenly disappeared from Zhenling's camp. However, Lu Ping's divine telekinesis was powerful enough to confirm that Lin Yu Laozu was still in Zhenling's camp. He had just concealed his figure and aura so that no one could detect him. That's why I'm asking you. You've been in the camp all this time, so you must know where he went. Xie Tianyang said matter-of-factly. Lu Ping spread his hands helplessly and said, I don't know either. Of course, Lu Ping knew where Lin Yu Laozu was, but Lin Yu Laozu had hidden himself for a reason. Even if Lu Ping knew where Lin Yu Laozu was, he would not expose him. Xie Tianyang was a little puzzled and said, why did Senior Lin Yu hide? Did he want to trick the Azura? But with his strength, he did not have to do that, did he? Naturally, Lu Ping wouldn't tell them about Lin Yu's injuries. Instead, he looked around and said, Brother Xie, do you know why the Azura army didn't launch a full-scale attack on our sect's encampment? Instead, they only sent out 8 Jade Demon Asuras. If the 3 Azura Asuras and the remaining Jade Demon Asuras attacked together, we wouldn't be able to defend our encampment. Xie Tianyang also cast a glance at the void surrounding the encampment. Pursing his lips, he sneered, what's so strange about that? The Moro army has caused such a huge commotion, and there are more than one sect around the encampment. I'm afraid that all the sects that participated in the battle against the Moro army have already received the news. I'm afraid that there are already many people lurking in the nearby void. They're just watching from the sidelines or waiting to take advantage of the situation. However, Azura has obviously discovered these enemies hiding in the void. They're worried that they'll be attacked from the back if they go all out, so they naturally don't dare to put all their strength into attacking the encampment. Xie Tianyang suddenly realized something and said, are you saying that Senior Lin Yu wants to lure the cultivators hiding in the empty space to attack? Lu Ping smiled bitterly and said, if we don't think of a way to stop these people from attacking, once the 3 Asuras can't hold back an attack, do you think our camp will be able to withstand them? Xie Tianyang was confused and said, then can't he just reveal his identity? With his strength, he can at least hold back 2 Asuras. It might not be impossible for him to stop all 3 of them. Coupled with pure Yang Laozu's rallying power, once the surrounding cultivators attack, the chances of winning are quite high. Lu Ping naturally could not tell him that Lin Yu Laozu was heavily injured. He only sighed and said, Brother Xie, Zhenling is not your Purple Sun Palace. Lin Yu Laozu is also not comparable to pure Yang Laozu of Purple Sun Palace. These people are people who won't act until they see the rabbit. If we want them to attack, even if we have a 100% chance of winning, there will only be a sliver of a chance if we can guarantee their own safety. Lu Ping smiled bitterly and said, after all, Mo Luo's counterattack this time is aimed at our sect's encampment. Even if Mo Luo manages to open up a path to break out of the encirclement, the sect will still be responsible for it. In a situation where it has nothing to do with them, they would rather watch our sect fight to the last man than help us. It was not that Xie Tianyang did not understand this, but because of his background, he did not need to consider these things at all. After all, no one in the cultivation world could force Purple Sun Palace into such a predicament. Then how is Senior Lin Yu going to lure these people who are watching from the sidelines to attack? Let's wait and see. Chapter 1279. Zhenling had suffered quite a number of casualties in this battle. 5 of the core forging stage cultivators in the Dao soldier formation had fallen, and nearly 10 of them were injured. Lu Ping checked on a few of the more seriously injured ones before rushing over to Wei England's side. Sang Yu was extremely regretful. He had only been distracted for a moment, and Wei England had been consecutively ambushed and injured by the Blood Demon and Blood Azura. Fortunately, Wei England was not weak, and her injuries were not life-threatening. Lu Ping had naturally prepared sufficient pills in his hands. After consuming a soul return pill, she woke up from her coma. However, it was obvious that she would not be able to make it in time for the next battle. Lu Ping even suspected that even if Wei England had recovered by then, Sang Yu would not allow her to participate in the next battle. Other than Wei England, Tian Fan, Tian Shui, Qin Yu, Qin Gang, and Ji Tianxian all had some injuries on their bodies. However, these injuries did not have much of an impact on their own strength. If they were also unable to participate in the battle, it was likely that Zhenling would really fall this time. In a hidden corner of the encampment, Lu Ping once again met Lin Yu Laozu. "Brat, your divine sense is really extraordinary. You can even find the old man when he is hiding." Lin Yu Laozu said that he was surprised, but his expression seemed to have already predicted that Lu Ping would be able to find him. "Senior, the current situation is not good." Although Lu Ping had previously downplayed the situation to Xie Tianyang, he was obviously deeply worried. Seeing Hua Wuyin similarly lying at Lin Yu Laozu's feet, he could not help but ask, "Senior, you?" Lin Yu Laozu clapped his hands and said, "The wind and rain dual whips are famous practitioners in the cultivation world. The wind and rain whips being controlled by Han Wuya alone cannot be compared to two people controlling one each. Han Wuya and Hua Wuyin working together can at least block an Azura." Lu Ping also agreed with this point. After all, these two people were able to escape from Seven Fan Laozu's hands when working together. It might not be easy to suppress an Azura, but it was not too difficult to entangle it. However, this sealing secret technique of yours is really very strange. Lin Yu Laozu had a look of surprise and said, "After using the secret technique, the old man actually could not undo the seal you placed on this person." Lu Ping said, "This person's foundation has already been damaged by me. I am afraid that in this life, there is no possibility of him advancing an inch. Now that he is also injured, how much of his strength can he use?" Lin Yu Laozu seemed to be unaware of Lu Ping's viciousness. He only thought for a moment and said, "At least he is much stronger than a mid-Dharma adept. However, after this battle, this person will probably be crippled." Lu Ping smiled and said, "Since there is a feud with the Taishen sect, with the Taishen sect's personality of seeking revenge for the smallest grievance, it does not matter how big or small the feud is." Lin Yu Laozu smiled and did not say anything, obviously agreeing with what Lu Ping had said. Lu Ping then tapped a few points on Hua Wuyin's body. Hua Wuyin immediately woke up, but his expression was a little dazed. He could only obediently take the spiritual treasure rain whip from Han Wuya's hands. Compared to Hua Wuyin, who had a blank expression, Han Wuya's eyes were already turning. Lin Yu Laozu slapped Han Wuya on the top of his head and dispersed the divine will that he had painstakingly gathered. He sighed and said, "This late Dharma adept is really not easy to control. In comparison, this Hua Wuyin is much easier to control after being injured." After dealing with Hua Wuyin, Lu Ping then remembered the reason why he was looking for Lin Yu Laozu this time. He asked, "Senior, what do you think is the possibility of the people around the encampment making a move?" Lin Yu Laozu did not even think about it and said, "That depends on how much power Zhenling has shown this time. If he is able to stop 3 Asuras, however, it is best for your sect to prepare an escape route in advance. If things go south, you can immediately return to the North Sea. At least you can preserve your sect's strength." Lu Ping's heart sank and he said, "Senior, are you saying that there may be reinforcements from Mara's army?" Lin Yu Laozu waved his hand and handed a jade scroll to him. He said, "This is the message that Brother Xiao sent earlier. Take a look for yourself." Lu Ping scanned the contents of the jade scroll with his divine sense and his expression turned ugly. He said, "My sect is not the only one attacking Mara's army this time." Lin Yu Laozu nodded and said, "Not only is this not the only one, but the one attacking your sect is actually the weakest of the Mara's armies. The other Mara's armies have all been supported by heavenly demons. This is also why the pure young cultivators have not appeared here all this time." Lu Ping's expression changed for a long time before he said, "Senior, are you saying that the other armies that have broken out of the encampment are all feints? The one that is coming for our sect might actually be the real one?" Lin Yu Laozu was stunned for a moment and said, "That's not impossible. There might be an expert in Mara's army to guide them." Lu Ping did not see the mocking expression on Lin Yu Laozu's face. He only said, "Could it be that there are existences that are more powerful than heavenly demons in Mara's army?" Lin Yu Laozu was stunned again. Obviously, Lu Ping did not understand the meaning of his words. However, what Lu Ping said did not seem unreasonable. He seemed to have heard of a similar legend before, but no one had appeared to prove it. However, thinking about the 9 mystical tower that had been besieged for more than 10 years, it was one of the 5 holy lands of Central Earth, and there were true spirit cultivators in the sect. Especially when he saw the power of Wuxing School with the heaven-opening artifact at the foot of Luotian Mountain. The 9 mystical tower and Wuxing School might have a sect treasure that was comparable to the cauldron of heaven and earth. Under such circumstances, they were still besieged by Mara's army for more than 10 years. It was naturally possible that there were asuras and heavenly demons in Mara's army, but if there were existences that surpassed heavenly demons, this explanation seemed to be more reasonable. Lin Yu Laozu was reminded by Lu Ping's unintentional words. As his thoughts scattered, he suddenly thought of more things. If there was really such an existence, why did 8th Sister Zhu never mention it? Were the other holy lands also kept in the dark? However, if there was really such an existence, in Lin Yu Laozu's opinion, the other holy lands most likely knew about it, so it could be said that they deliberately concealed this information. However, what was their purpose in concealing this information? Among the 13 pure young masters, were there other people who knew about this information? For a moment, Lin Yu Laozu felt that there might be some unknown conspiracy hidden in this battle to besiege Mara. Lin Yu Laozu, who was a rogue cultivator, even felt that there was almost no one he could trust anymore. Before Lu Ping left, Lin Yu Laozu handed a purple jade slip to Lu Ping and said, "This is the supreme divine sense secret technique that the old man told you about before. This time, the battle to besiege Mara is unpredictable. I'm afraid things are not as simple as they seem on the surface. If you want to enter the 7th Patriarch's Taoist altar, keep your life first. In the future, as long as you help the Qin brothers, it will be considered as repaying the old man's favor today." Lu Ping hesitated for a moment and said, "Senior has already passed the inheritance of Heavenly Yi sect to the 2 Qin brothers. Why can't you help them rebuild their sect? With Senior's identity as pure young Laozu, in the future, regardless of whether it is Luo Xin sect or Heavenly Yi sect, I'm afraid their influence will be greater than before." Lin Yu Laozu shook his head and said, "If the old man wanted to rebuild Heavenly Yi sect, why would he wait until now? The old man is ultimately used to this kind of leisurely life. Things like sects are too complicated. The old man is really not willing to participate in it." Lu Ping found Tian Fan, Tian Shui, and Tian Shan Laozu. He told the 3 of them about the information he got from Lin Yu Laozu. The 3 Laozu's faces were obviously not looking good. "Indeed, we need to prepare a path of retreat. Our sect cannot fight a war of attrition with Mara's army here. Once the cultivators from the various sects choose not to take action, we might have to retreat back to the Northern Sea," Tian Shui Laozu said as he exchanged glances with Tian Fan and Tian Shan Laozu. He continued, "When the time comes, you just need to bring your disciples and leave. Your senior uncle Tian Fan, senior uncle Tian Shan, and I will stay behind to cover the retreat." Staying behind to cover the retreat often meant death. Lu Ping raised his brows and said, "It's better if I stay behind. Forgive me for being presumptuous, but the 2 senior martial granduncles and junior martial uncle might not be stronger than me." Tian Shan Laozu spoke the truth, it's not that they might not be. With your current strength, none of us are your match. It is precisely because of this that you are allowed to lead your disciples back to the Northern Sea. Along the way, the various sects are filled with hungry wolves that will devour people without spitting out the bones. If we don't have someone who can lead us, who knows how many of our disciples will survive when we return to the Northern Sea? Lu Ping wanted to say something, but Tian Fan Laozu interrupted him. "This matter is decided. You don't need to say anything else. We are old to begin with. How many more years do we have left to live? On the contrary, you must continue living. As long as you are alive, we can protect the sect's 1,000-year foundation." After Mara's army retreated, they didn't give Zhenling much time to rest. Amidst the shrill cries of the Jade Demons, Mara's army regrouped and once again charged towards Zhenling's camp. This time, Mara's army really staked everything on this one attack. More than 2,000 Mara of all sizes rushed ashore from the Qingming River and charged towards Zhenling's camp. Blood Mara and Jade Mara's auras were hidden among Mara's army, but the cultivators in the camp all turned their attention to the 3 auras that were as violent as the sun behind Mara's army. The 3 Asuras finally couldn't hold back and attacked with all their might. Lu Ping stretched out his hand, and a purplish-blue cloud sail instantly spread out. Then, it turned into balls of auspicious clouds that attached themselves to the protective shield of the camp's formation. With the cloud sail's protection, at least Lu Ping didn't have to worry about the ordinary Zhenling disciples behind the formation being attacked by the demonic cultivator's soul-devouring magic. Other than the injured Wei Yinglan, Li Tianru, and Ji Tianxian who continued to control the formation, all the Dharma adepts in the camp came to the protective shield of the camp. The Mara's army was already more than 100 feet away. Lu Ping suddenly shouted, "Out!" Li Tianru, Ji Tianxian, and Lu Ping each raised a large bell in midair. Lu Ping shouted again, "Break!" Dang! 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 3 loud sounds rang out almost at the same time. Other than the fake vast ocean bell in Lu Ping's hand, the other 2 bells shattered under the heavy blows, leaving only a pile of scrap metal on the ground. Chapter 1280. 2 of the 3 sea bell replicas were smashed in an instant, leaving only the one in Lu Ping's hands of the highest quality still hanging in midair. However, the one ringing the bell had been replaced by Wei Yinglan, who was too injured to fight. The Mara army, which had already suffered a loss before, was not unprepared. Blood demons and jade demons hid among the attacking Mara army in order to prevent the chaos that would occur when the bell rang. However, they did not expect that Zhenling's side was even more ruthless. They kept producing more bronze bells, and in order to unleash the greatest power of the replicas, they directly smashed 2 of them. The booming sound of the sea bell once again caused the Mara army, which was charging at the forefront, to descend into chaos. Dozens of Mara, big and small, fell straight down from midair. Many of the remaining Mara also spun in midair as if they were dizzy. Blood demons and jade demons, who were hiding among the Mara army, did their best to command, but they were unable to eliminate this chaos in a short period of time. Lu Ping shouted, "Kill!" Other than Li Tianru and Ji Tianxian, who were presiding over the Dao soldier formation, as well as Wei Yinglan, who was ringing the bronze bell, the remaining Dharma adepts all killed their way out of Zhenling's camp. Lu Ping was the first to turn the thin water-flowing sword into a sky full of sword light. The Great River Flows East sword technique was no longer an indomitable force. Instead, it expanded the area of attack as much as possible, becoming a flood that broke a dam and spread out. All the Mara in front of Lu Ping, whether big or small, were all included in his killing range. It was a pity that there was not enough time, and the timing of the previous epiphany was extremely difficult to grasp. Otherwise, Lu Ping would not have minded using the Great River Flows East technique again. Although the Great River Flows East sword technique did not have the incredible power of the Great River Flows East technique, this sword technique was superior in that it was flexible. There were nearly 500 Mara, big and small, at the forefront of the Mara army, and in an instant, 150 of them were swept away by Lu Ping's sword light. Once again, 60 to 70 Mara fell from the sky like dumplings being dropped into a pot. The remaining half also retreated in a panic, causing the Mara army that was charging up from behind to be thrown into disarray once again. The remaining 40 to 50 Mara ultimately managed to avoid Lu Ping's sword light, but it was also because of the blood Mara that was hidden among these 150 Mara. Even so, there were 2 blood Shuras that had charged too close to the front. In the instant that Lu Ping's sword light swept over, Lu Ping was able to capture their tracks. Then, the nether water sword and Lu Xiaoping disappeared into the sword light. By the time Lu Ping's Great River Flows East sword technique dissipated the sword light, these 2 blood Shuras had already died at the hands of Lu Ping, and he had obtained another 60% of the battle credit. The Jade Mara that was hidden among the Mara army clearly did not expect that the opponent's Dharma adept would actually attack the ordinary Mara right from the start. Coupled with the chaos caused by the 2 bronze bells being smashed, Lu Ping actually managed to defeat more than 100 Mara vanguards in one go. There was a whistling sound, and 2 Jade Shuras and 1 Jade Demon charged towards Lu Ping from within the Mara army. The scene of Lu Ping single-handedly killing hundreds of Mara on the Qingming River was still fresh in their minds. The Mara army was very wary of Lu Ping. It was not just Lu Ping. In the instant that the imitation sea bell had been struck, Xie Tianyang, who had been following closely behind Lu Ping, had also charged into the Mara army. A blazing sky sun sword was like a blazing sun that had fallen into the mortal realm. Everywhere he passed, there was a blinding white flash, and then Mara after Mara, whose entire body was set ablaze, screamed as they fell from the sky. However, Xie Tianyang was clearly not like Lu Ping, who had deliberately targeted the ordinary Mara. He had charged into the Mara army purely for the Blood Mara and Jade Mara, who were normally hidden among them. He wanted to kill them in one go, so that he could gain some battle credits. The Mara that had been killed by him were just blocking his way. And Xie Tianyang's ferocious charge had very quickly allowed him to track down the tracks of a blood demon. At that moment, he charged forward as if he was in a killing frenzy. The extreme Yang sword technique, which was passed down in the direct lineage of the Ziyang Palace, was directly unleashed by the sword chi of the blazing sky sun sword into a ball of fire. The blood demon was instantly reduced to ashes within the ball of sword chi. The flying sword in his hand turned, and he was going to kill a blood Shura that had been trying to save the blood demon, but had unexpectedly been frightened by Xie Tianyang's violent attack and turned to kill it. But the high-ranking Mara that was hidden among the Mara army was clearly also not happy. A Jade Shura was the first to attack, and Xie Tianyang had no choice but to abandon the blood Shura that had been scared away and turn around to fight the Jade Shura. At this time, the blood Shura that had attacked earlier turned around and ran back, and began to help the Jade Shura harass Xie Tianyang. This made Xie Tianyang so angry that he vented all his anger on the Jade Shura opposite him. For a moment, both the Jade Shura and the Blood Shura were beaten to a pulp. Previously, Lu Ping's 50 battle points had really provoked Xie Tianyang. Xie Tianyang admitted that he could not see through Lu Ping's abilities, but he did not think that he was that far behind. In fact, it was not just Xie Tianyang. Although the other direct lineage adepts in the middle Dharma stage had been laughing and laughing at Xie Tianyang's defeat by Lu Ping earlier, each of them had been suppressing their anger and wanting to compete with each other. Following closely behind the two of them, the group of mid-Dharma adepts and the two grand adepts who were being controlled swarmed forward. The 500 vanguard of the demon Luo army were all cut down as if they were vegetables, and not many of them were left. The sudden burst of power from Zhenling's side caused the entire Mara army to tremble, and the less than 2,000 Mara soldiers all stopped in their tracks for a moment. And the blood Mara hidden among the 500 vanguard troops was also killed by the direct lineages of the various sects who had suddenly rushed out to snatch the battle points. With their previous experience, these direct lineages of the middle Dharma stage were much smarter. Although killing Jade Mara would give them more points, killing Blood Mara was obviously easier and faster to obtain points. Xiahou Wushang, who was following closely behind Xie Tianyang, also quickly caught up with a blood Shura that was fleeing in a panic. In the previous battle, among the middle Dharma adepts, only Xiahou Wushang and Chan Xiong of the Heavenly Moon sect had not gained a single point. Although Xiahou Wushang was not born into a direct lineage of a holy land like Xie Tianyang, his personality was indeed more arrogant than the former, and it was impossible for him to take such a blow. Seeing that a Jade Shura was closing in to help the fleeing Blood Shura, Xiahou Wushang still brazenly struck out with his sword, wanting to kill the Blood Shura before the Jade Shura's attack arrived. Yun Jian, who was following behind him, saw that his senior was in danger, and hurriedly leaped forward, the flying sword in his hand turning into threads of sword light, as if weaving a cloud of mist in an instant to protect Xiahou Wushang as much as possible. In the three swords of thunder and cloud, Yun Jian used the cloud mist sword to confuse the enemy and focus on defense, Thunder Sword used brute force and focus on attack, and Lightning Sword used sneak attacks and focus on killing. The three of them worked well together, and they made a name for themselves among the direct lineage adepts of the Tianxian sect. Although they were not as good as the top 5 direct lineage adepts of the Tianxian sect, when the three of them worked together, it was not difficult for them to challenge those of a higher level. Now that Thunder Sword and Lightning Sword had fallen, and Yun Jian had been seriously injured and had delayed his training, the gap between their levels was even greater. Yun Jian knew that he would not be able to block a single attack from the Jade Shura, but at this time, he still resolutely went forward. The companion spiritual treasure in the Jade Shura's hand was getting closer and closer, but Yun Jian had already wove the threads of sword light into a sword cloud that was as black as ink. Yun Jian had used up all his strength, and the rest was up to fate. Fart. There was a muffled sound, and for Yun Jian, the fateful moment had come. The sword cloud that he had wove suddenly disappeared, and the blood in Yun Jian's body churned. In the end, he still could not block it. Yun Jian had already closed his eyes and waited for death, but suddenly there was a dang sound above his head, and Xiahou Wushang's voice came into his ear. "You're taking too much risk, get back." When Yun Jian looked up, Xiahou Wushang was already fighting with the Jade Shura, and not far away, a headless blood Shura was falling into the Qingming River. Yun Jian's block had caused the Jade Shura's attack to slow down a little. After Xiahou Wushang had successfully killed the blood Shura, he turned around and saved Yun Jian, who was fighting with all his might. Yun Jian let out a sigh of relief, and the blood in his body churned. He was very excited. Although he had only blocked half of the Jade Shura's attack, for Yun Jian, it was a great boost to his confidence. After retreating a distance, he formed a line of defense with the early Dharma adepts on Zhenling's side, and began to block the Mara army that was attacking the camp's formation. At this time, almost all the mid-Dharma adepts had engaged in battle with the Jade Mara. Lu Ping alone was holding off 3 Jade Mara, while Tian Fan and Tian Shui, the 2 Laozu, were holding off 2 Jade Shura. Xie Tianyang was surrounded by 1 Jade Shura and 2 Blood Mara. Su Jin was also fighting a Jade Shura, while Chan Yu and Chan Xiong teamed up with Liu Tianyuan to fight a Jade Shura and a Jade Demon. Laozu of Tianshan was also fighting a Jade Demon and 2 Blood Shura. Xiahou Wushang and Sang Yu were also fighting 2 Jade Shura, while Qing Hu and the other 2 were fighting 1 Jade Demon and 2 Blood Shura together. Behind these mid-Dharma adepts, Tian Tian, Samling, Qin Yu, Qin Gang, Yun Jian, and the others formed a second line of defense with the protection of the camp's formation. They tried their best to stop the Blood Mara that was charging towards them, preventing them from joining the Mara army in attacking the protective walls of the formation. Behind them, the 3 talents and 5 elements formation was operating at full power. Under the protection of the cloud sails and the camp's formation, the Mara's attacks on the camp became Zhenling's last line of defense. However, just as the battlefield was in a stalemate, 2 people rushed out from Zhenling's camp. These 2 people immediately rushed into Lu Ping's battle with the 3 Mara. 2 whips, like snakes, took advantage of the moment when Lu Ping's full-force attack had forced the 3 Jade Mara into a panic, and wrapped around the necks of 2 Jade Shura. Just as these 2 people appeared from the camp, the roar of 3 lives came from behind Mara's army. The 3 Asuras, who had not made a move yet, were about to take the opportunity to break the stalemate, but unexpectedly, Zhenling's side had taken the initiative. Chapter 1281. Han Wuya and Hua Wuyin, the 2 great cultivators, had interfered in the battle at just the right time. Not only did the 3 Asuras become extremely furious, but even the cultivators from the various sects who were watching from the sidelines were also muttering to themselves that this was too much of a coincidence. Just as the 2 great cultivators attacked, Lu Ping, who had been attacked by the 3-headed Jade Mara, suddenly unleashed his power. The thin water-flowing sword split into 2 green dragons that pounced towards the 2 Jade Shuras on the left and right. Following closely behind the 2 dragons was a flash of blue light from the sword, and a small person about a foot tall. At the same time, Lu Ping's divine sense turned into a raging wave of fire and rushed towards the Jade Demon behind the 2 Jade Shuras with a force that could topple mountains and overturn seas. The protective treasures like the Cloud Sail and the Sea Bell were not in his hands, so the impact of Lu Ping's divine will was not amplified. However, Lu Ping took the opportunity to reach out and grab the air. A thunderball descended from the sky. After the 7 Treasures Thunder Calabash had absorbed a bit of the pure young thunder calamity, its quality had increased again, and its power had also increased. Although it could not be used by Lu Ping in front of him, this divine thunder of Yin Kuei water was still a serious threat to the Jade Demon. The 3-headed Jade Mara's tacit cooperation was finally interrupted by Lu Ping's full-force attack. Just as the 3-headed Jade Mara was flustered, the 2 great cultivators, Han Wuya and Hua Wuyin, suddenly attacked before the 3 Asuras could. The wind and rain dual whip's tacit cooperation was not inferior to the wind and snow dual fans. Moreover, these two spiritual treasures were wielded by two late Dharma great cultivators who were far superior to Tian Fan and Tian Shui. The two jade shuras were unable to resist, and their heads were curled up by the two whips. The netherworld aqua sword pierced through the void, and a purplish-blue lightning was born on the blade. It pierced through the jade shura's body, and then the lightning exploded, instantly killing the jade shura. After Lu Ping combined the formless sword technique with the thunderclap sword technique, it impressively became a new type of swordsmanship divine ability that was extremely lethal to Mara. On the other side, Lu Xiaohai took advantage of the fact that the jade shura's neck was wrapped around by the wind whip. He stabbed the willow sword into the jade shura's eyeball and into her brain. In the blink of an eye, two jade shura had been killed, and he had earned another 20 points. The projection stone showed that Lu Ping now had 76 points. However, Lu Ping didn't have the time to gloat over his achievement. The three asuras had instantly plunged Zhenling's sect into a dangerous situation. The death of two jade asuras was not enough to make up for the situation. Two of the enraged asuras went for Han Wuya and Hua Wuyin, while the other went for Lu Ping. From the time that Mara's army had traveled upstream to the Qingming River, the number of Jade Mara that had fallen to Lu Ping had reached 4. Lu Ping had become a major threat to Mara's army. Hua Wuyin, who was on the left, was sent flying when he came into contact with the other Azura. Hua Wuyin's power had been reduced by less than half because of Lu Ping's attack, and he couldn't even take one hit from the Azura. Han Wuya, who was on the right, managed to block the Azura's attack, but he was affected by the Azura's control. He couldn't react fast enough, and he was forced to retreat under the Azura's attack. It was only a matter of time before he was defeated. Lu Ping wasn't just facing an Azura. He was also facing a Jade Demon, who had just recovered from Lu Ping's attack. The Jade Demon threw a crystalline skull out of the protective black mist that had almost been destroyed by Lu Ping's Kuei water. The undulating protective black mist showed that the Jade Demon hadn't recovered from the impact of Lu Ping's spiritual fire wave. But seeing the Azura coming, it couldn't wait to cooperate with the Azura to kill Lu Ping. Without the help of the two great cultivators, Lu Ping seemed to be in a desperate situation when faced with a pincer attack from an Azura and a Jade Demon. However, in the face of such a situation, not only did Lu Ping not cower, he didn't even try to dodge the Azura's attack. Instead, he charged straight at the Jade Demon, exposing his back to the Azura that was chasing after him. What was he trying to do? Was he trying to drag someone down with him even though he knew he was going to die? However, just as the Azura's companion numinous treasure was about to pierce through Lu Ping's back, a slightly hunchbacked figure suddenly appeared several feet behind the Azura. Rich pure yang qi rose into the sky, and the majestic aura was like a giant mountain that supported the sky. The moment Lin Yu Laozu appeared, he was like the sun in the sky. He was destined to become the most dazzling existence in this battle. The moment Patriarch Lin Yu appeared, the Azura had already sensed what it meant for a pure yang cultivator to appear behind it. No one knew better than the Azura itself what it meant when a pure yang cultivator appeared behind it. Compared to killing the human cultivator in front of it, its own life was clearly more important. The Azura turned around in an instant. However, the moment it turned around, it had already protected the companion numinous treasure in its hand, which was far more powerful than a second tribulation numinous treasure. However, the pure yang human cultivator behind him seemed to have calculated every single detail of the Azura's reaction. He swung the jasper wind flute in his hand, and the distance of several tens of feet was crossed in the blink of an eye. The Azura had just turned around when it felt a sharp pain in its back. The jasper wind flute had already smashed into its back. The rich spiritual qi quickly dissipated. Although the Azura wouldn't vomit blood after being seriously injured, the sudden dissipation of this spiritual qi could greatly weaken Mara's combat power. It was no different from being seriously injured. Lin Yu Laozu sighed inwardly. The jasper wind flute was, after all, only a first tribulation numinous treasure. Moreover, it was not a numinous treasure that was good at direct contact. His strength was also greatly reduced when he was injured. Otherwise, even if he had a second tribulation numinous treasure in his hand, even if he couldn't kill the Azura, he would still be able to make it lose most of its combat power. Lin Yu Laozu wanted to attack again, but the Azura that had been sneakily attacked was already prepared. Lin Yu Laozu had already lost the best opportunity to severely injure the Azura again. At this moment, Hai Wuya, who was being beaten by another Azura, suddenly shouted. Lin Yu Laozu's expression changed. Hai Wuya had finally broken free from the restriction that Lin Yu Laozu had used on him using the divine telekinesis secret technique. Fortunately, the Azura didn't care whether Han Wuya was being controlled or not. It only focused on attacking him. Han Wuya couldn't escape from the Azura's fierce attacks for a while. However, when the Azura had beaten Han Wuya until he couldn't fight back, it suddenly retreated and charged towards Lin Yu Laozu. Although Lin Yu Laozu's strength had been damaged, he was a pure young Laozu after all. After severely injuring the Azura with a sneak attack, he immediately followed up with a series of attacks. Although he couldn't kill the Azura immediately, he beat it until it couldn't fight back. At this moment, the other Azura gave up on Han Wuya and charged towards Lin Yu Laozu. If Lin Yu Laozu was at his peak, facing two Asuras head-on would be a piece of cake for Lin Yu Laozu. However, at this moment, although he had taken some of the pills that Lu Ping had provided to temporarily suppress his injuries, he was still unable to face two Asuras that were seriously injured. Under the pincer attack of the two Asuras, Lin Yu Laozu was forced to retreat again and again, barely holding on. On the other side, after Han Wuya, who had been abandoned by the other Azura, regained control of his body, he unexpectedly didn't leave. This was because not far away from him, Hua Wuyin, whose divine telekinesis was still sealed, was fighting desperately against the attack of the third Azura. Under the watchful eyes of the crowd, Han Wuya could not abandon his junior brother and retreat by himself. Left with no other choice, Han Wuya could only join the battle again and join forces with Hua Wuyin to resist the Azura's attack. At this moment, Hua Wuyin couldn't just be described as heavily injured. If his divine telekinesis had not been sealed by Lu Ping and Lin Yu Laozu's divine telekinesis secret technique, and he only knew how to fight with his life on the line, he most likely would have collapsed under the continuous attacks of the Azura. Han Wuya already hated Zhenling and Lin Yu Laozu to the extreme. However, at this moment, he had no choice but to cooperate with Hua Wuyin, who had lost his consciousness, to resist the attacks of the Azura. Fortunately, although Hua Wuyin's consciousness had been sealed, the instincts of the wind and rain dual whips, which had worked together for hundreds of years, were still there. Although the two of them still couldn't resist the Azura's attacks, they could at least protect themselves for a short period of time. Han Wuya had already made up his mind. As long as he saw the right opportunity, he would escape with Hua Wuyin. Although the Azura was fierce, it was not strong enough to stop the two of them from escaping unscathed. The only thing he had to consider was how to help Hua Wuyin break free from Lin Yu Laozu's divine telekinesis seal. Perhaps he should find the right opportunity and forcibly take Hua Wuyin away. Lin Yu Laozu was already in a difficult situation against the attacks of the two Asuras. If this continued, this itinerant pure young cultivator would probably become the first pure young Laozu to fall in the battle against Mara. At this critical moment, Lu Ping's thin stream sword finally arrived and took the injured Azura from Lin Yu Laozu's hands, relieving the pressure on Lin Yu Laozu. Not far away, the Jade Demon, whose protective black mist had been scattered by Lu Ping's divine thunderclap sword technique and Jade Phosphorus Soulfire, was thrown into chaos by the continuous attacks of the divine Yin Water Lightning and the Shadowless sword technique. In the end, it still couldn't avoid Lu Xiaoping's sneak attack on the back of its head. At this moment, although its body was still floating in the air, its body was slowly dissolving into dense spirit qi and then dissipating into the world. Chapter 1282. With Lin Yu Laozu's meticulous planning and Lu Ping's full cooperation, Zhenling's side was able to barely maintain a stalemate despite the three Asuras going all out. However, both Lu Ping and Lin Yu Laozu knew that this stalemate wouldn't be maintained for too long. After all, Mara's side had the advantage in numbers. As time went on, their own side would be exhausted and the advantage would slowly return to Mara's side. Moreover, Lin Yu Laozu and Lu Ping could already see that Han Wuya was planning to flee. Once he successfully escaped with Hua Wuyin, the Azura would definitely launch a furious counterattack. At that time, Junling's side wouldn't be able to hold out for long before they were completely routed. Although the stalemate was short, and what Junling's sect needed was just one person to break the stalemate. Although the Devil Luo army had the advantage in numbers, the real deciding factor of the battle was the high-grade cultivators and the high-grade Devil Luo who were restraining each other. As long as one of these high-grade cultivators was free, they would immediately be able to reverse the situation. At that time, no matter how many Mara's army there was, it would be useless. By the same logic, if Mara's side was able to break the stalemate first, what awaited Junling would be a massacre and complete defeat. The only difference between the two was that if neither side was able to break the stalemate, Mara's army could rely on their advantage in numbers to slowly break the stalemate. The longer this dragged on, the more disadvantageous it would be for Junling. The person that Lin Yu Laozu's meticulous plan to break the stalemate was none other than the cultivators that were still watching from the sidelines. In Lin Yu Laozu's view, when Junling was able to block the all-out attack of Mara's army, the cultivators that had been watching from afar should see an opportunity. Once they were able to take this opportunity to attack, Junling's crisis would immediately be resolved. Unfortunately, Lin Yu Laozu had overestimated these cultivators. Or rather, he hadn't expected that Han Wuya, who was currently trying to break free from the great cultivators, would be able to escape. At this time, everyone could see that Han Wuya was planning to flee. Although Hua Wuyin was still somewhat muddle-headed, after such a long battle, the secret technique that Lin Yu Laozu had placed on him was also weakening. Once Han Wuya and Hua Wuyin left the battle, who would dare to take over the vacant Azura? At this time, if anyone wanted to intervene in the battle, they would have to be prepared to receive a head-on attack from the Azura. Apart from pure young cultivators, who else had the strength and courage to block an enraged Azura? Even if both sides were not lacking, and there were great cultivators who could block the Azura together, why would they act as a shield for others? Could it be that when the time came, others would take the opportunity to kill their way into Mara's army and snatch battle merits? Why? Due to this subtle state of mind, the cultivators who were watching the battle from the void far away from Junling's sect's encampment were reluctant to lend a hand. Since that was the case, they would wait until both sides were heavily injured before helping. At the very least, Junling's sect's encampment was not bad. When the time came, they would be able to reap the benefits while the Sandpiper and Clam fought. At this critical moment, a clear and crisp sound suddenly came from within Junling's camp. Near the camp's protective array disc, Black Fox sensed that something was amiss in the house of gold that Lu Ping had left beside him. Thus, he thought of what Lu Ping had told him before, and his eyes instantly lit up. Could it be Lu Chino? Daoist Mystic Fox hurriedly opened the spatial door of the House of Gold. A strong gust of wind rolled up a pillar of fire and shot up into the sky. A beautiful greenish-red bird covered in raging flames emerged from the pillar of fire, bringing up a strong gust of wind. It soared into the sky and let out a series of cries that echoed for miles. What a good windfire Blue Luan! It had actually managed to condense its Dharma power in such a short time and step into the Dharma phase in one fell swoop. Lu China had been stuck at the 9th level of the core forging realm for a long time. However, under Lu Ping's repeated requests, she had never given up on tempering her cultivation base even though she did not have a suitable windfire dual-attribute heaven-rank spirit treasure. This was especially true after Lu Ping had given a Luan Tear Pearl to Lu Chino. Lu Chino had been cultivating day and night, absorbing and refining the aura left behind by the Luan Daoist. At this point, her foundation had already become exceptionally strong, and she was only missing one last opportunity. Coincidentally, at this time, Lu Ping had finally obtained the Windfire Jade Wall, a mid-grade heaven-rank spirit treasure. This Windfire dual-attribute heaven-rank spirit treasure finally opened the floodgates for Lu China's cultivation base to advance by leaps and bounds. Just as Junling and Mara's armies were in a stalemate, Lu China finally succeeded in condensing her Dharma power. Although Lu China's cultivation base was not too stable because she had just broken through to the Dharma phase, the current situation did not allow her to calm down and consolidate her cultivation base. After seeing the situation on the battlefield clearly, Lu Qina resolutely rushed out of the Five Elements formation. Wu Yinglan, who had been staying in the camp and knocking on the sea bell replica magic treasure that Lu Ping had left for her, was stunned for a moment when she saw Lu Qina turn into a streak of fire and rush out of the camp. Seeing the stalemate outside the camp, Wu Yinglan's expression changed continuously. In the end, she took out a white jade bottle from the storage magic treasure at her waist. Finally, as if she had made up her mind, she took out a vermilion pellet from the jade bottle, then raised her head and swallowed it. The moment Lu Qina rushed out of the camp, Liu Qianyuan suddenly abandoned Chan Yu and Chan Xiong and flew back. Chan Yu and Chan Xiong had to face the joint attack of a Jade Shura and a Jade Demon with their own strength. At the same time, they also had to hold back the Blood Shura that had been cooperating with the two Jade Mara, so that it could not chase after Liu Qianyuan. They also had to deal with the attacks of many big and small Mara. The situation suddenly fell into a disadvantage, and the two sisters could only barely hold on for a moment. Lu Qina's sudden rush out and Liu Qianyuan's instant retreat caused a ripple in the situation for a moment. Then, the two of them simultaneously rushed towards Tian Tian, who was relying on the defense formation of the camp and had to cooperate with the Dao soldier formation behind him from time to barely resist the attacks of the two Blood Shura. The two Blood Shura obviously realized the danger of the situation. One of the Blood Shura immediately rushed back, trying to stop Liu Qianyuan. However, it underestimated Liu Qianyuan's strength. As Zhenling's current third-generation disciple, it could be said that he was second only to Lu Ping. The strength of Liu Qianyuan, who had refined the Dharma Power Soul, was not so easily blocked by a Blood Shura. Moreover, at this time, Zhenling had reached the point where he had to fight with his life on the line. In the midst of a loud bang, under the Blood Shura's terrified gaze, Liu Qianyuan, whose mouth was bleeding, had actually managed to gain the upper hand in this collision and forced the Blood Shura to retreat. Behind it, Tian Tian and Lu Qina, who had rushed up to attack together, had already completely suppressed the other Blood Shura. The strength that Lu Qina had displayed was also secretly shocking. This was not a demonic practitioner who had just broken through to the Dharma Laws stage. This level of strength was completely not below that of Tian Tian, who had been immersed in the early Dharma Laws stage for many years. At this moment, Ji Tianxian, who had been presiding over the Dao soldier formation with Li Xuanru, suddenly left the formation. The entire operation of the Dao soldier formation was completely placed on Li Tianru alone, causing the emergency efficiency of the Dao soldier formation to suddenly drop. The Mara army that had surrounded the encampment formation suddenly went berserk. The color of the protective formation shield changed rapidly, as if it was about to be broken in the next moment. At the place where the matrix plate was located, Black Fox directed several matrix masters to replace all the top-grade spirit stones that had been embedded in the matrix plate in a short period of time. At the same time, Linglong, who was suppressing the five-element ring, suddenly let out a buzzing sound. Black Fox saw a thick stream of blue yuan qi continuously flow into the five-element ring under her feet. The five-element ring, which had originally been constantly flickering, immediately stabilized. Black Fox and the other Matrix Masters did not hesitate to replace dozens of top-grade spirit stones in succession. The protective formation of the encampment finally held up under the frenzied siege of Mara's army, but this situation obviously could not be maintained for too long. However, maintaining it for only a moment was enough. Ji Tianxian killed his way out of the encampment, and under the protection of several puppets, he instantly charged into the battle between Lu Qina and Tian Tian. Caught off guard, the Blood Shura, who had been suppressed by the two of them together, was immediately severely injured by Ji Tianxuan's puppets. Two of the three puppets that Ji Tianxian had carefully refined, which were close to the Dharma stage, were destroyed in an instant. Ji Tianxuan's task was accomplished, and he could not care less about his puppets. He turned and retreated back into the encampment formation. Without him presiding over it, Li Tianru could not command the three talents five elements Dao soldier formation alone. If Black Fox and the other Matrix Masters had not reacted in time, it was likely that Mara army, who had relaxed their suppression, would have just broken through the encampment formation. Just after Ji Tianxian had severely injured the Blood Shura at the cost of two Dharma puppets, under the joint attack of Tian Tian and Lu Qina, it was only a matter of time before the Bloodshorer died. However, they were fighting for time. More than 1,000 feet away, Hua Wuyin finally began to recover from his previous muddle-headed state. Despite the double seal of Lu Ping and Lin Yu Laozu, in order to enable Hua Wuyin to fight, Lu Ping had previously released the seal on his core space. However, this also left Hua Wuyin with a breakthrough to finally dispel Lin Yu Laozu's secret technique. However, these were all things that could not be helped. After awakening, Hua Wuyin naturally wouldn't fight against the Asuras anymore. However, he was already heavily injured, so he couldn't find a way to shake off the Asuras with Han Wuya. However, such an opportunity wasn't too difficult for the two great cultivators to deal with. Tian Tian gritted his teeth and suddenly thought of the Bloodshorer, who had been seriously injured. He rushed over and took a blow from the Bloodshorer's accompanying spiritual treasure to stall the Bloodshorer. Lu Qina was taken aback, but she naturally would not let go of this opportunity that Tian Tian had exchanged for by risking his injury. Her wings crisscrossed and slashed out, a flame slash and a wind spirit kill. The Bloodshorer's body suddenly turned into 3 pieces and fell from the air. Chapter 1283. Tian Tian and Lu Qina could have defeated the Bloodshorer in front of them without suffering any losses. However, in order to buy time, Tian Tian resolutely used a brutal method. He paid the price of being seriously injured in exchange for Lu Qina successfully killing the Bloodshorer, just to buy time. After killing the Bloodshorer, Tian Tian and Lu Qina immediately jumped toward the Bloodshorer that was fighting with Liu Tianyuan. Although Liu Tianyuan had suffered some injuries in the previous fight, it was because of his previous momentum that he did not hesitate to injure himself that Liu Tianyuan had the upper hand in the battle with the Bloodshorer. What Liu Tianyuan lacked was a Class 1 Calamity Spirit treasure. Once he had a suitable spirit treasure, his strength would even surpass many of the heirs of the same level who were born in famous sects and holy lands. Defeating the Bloodmara would be a piece of cake. Under the siege of the 3, the Bloodshorer naturally could not hold on for too long. Soon, it was beheaded by Tian Tian. The 3 of them did not dare to take a breather. They jumped toward the battle where Laozu of Tianshan was fighting. At this time, Laozu of Tianshan was fighting with a Jade Shura and 2 Asuras. Although he had a Class 2 Calamity Spirit treasure, the mountain-splitting axe, he was at a disadvantage in front of the joint siege of the 3 Shuras. However, Laozu of Tianshan's earth attribute cultivation method was excellent, so he could use the earth element real body to withstand the siege of the 3 Shuras. Liu Tianyuan and the other 2 suddenly joined the fray, but the 3 of them weren't fighting against the 2 Bloodshorer that were supporting them. They were fighting against the Jade Shura, who was taking up most of the Tianshan elders' attention. Liu Tianyuan, Tian Tian, and Lu Qina, who had just condensed a Dharma, worked together. The 3 of them did not have a spirit treasure, but they were fighting a Jade Shura. As soon as the battle began, under the attack of the Jade Shura's accompanying spirit treasure, Tian Tian's face changed. He opened his mouth and spat out a mouthful of dirty blood, but he still rushed forward with a ferocious look. The 3 of them worked together to block the Jade Shura, but the situation was very bad. Obviously, every time the 3 of them fought the Jade Shura, it was a kind of torture on the edge of life and death. But when Laozu of Tianshan saw the 3 of them join the battle, he left immediately. He did not dare to ignore the 3 of them. The mountain-splitting axe flew out, turned into an arc, and cut off half the shoulder of the Bloodshorer that had been harassing the Jade Shura the most. The other Bloodshorer saw that Laozu of Tianshan was looking at it, so it turned around and ran away. The current Mo Luo really seemed to have changed a lot. He was not as fearless as he used to be, but he was more cunning and intelligent. Laozu of Tianshan did not have time to chase after the Bloodshorer that had escaped. Instead, he turned around and ran towards Lu Ping, who was fighting an injured Azura. But at this time, something happened on the battlefield. When Lin Yu, Laozu, Lu Ping, and the others saw that Lu Qina had suddenly advanced to the Dharma stage, their eyes brightened. Even though the practitioners who were watching from the sidelines were still unwilling to help, if Lu Qina cooperated well, She, a small early Dharma adept, might be the key to breaking the situation. However, when Lu Qina joined the battle, Hua Wuyin had completely woken up. Although the two of them were still being chased by the Asuras who did not know what was going on, it was only a matter of time before they could escape. At this time, even Lin Yu, Laozu, was a little impatient. He said to the people around him, "My friends who are watching the battle, if you don't help now, when will you? With Zhenling and the others holding back Mara's army, as long as you help us, we will definitely win this battle. You will also be able to earn a lot of battle credits, and it will not be impossible for you to enter the 7th Patriarch's altar in the future." A low, cold laugh came from the void. "Who will fight the Asuras? If we help now, we can certainly win, but what if we wait until both of you are injured? Fellow Taoists Zhenling, please hold on a little longer. This way, it will be safer for us to help. Don't worry, as long as you continue to fight, we will not just watch as Mara's army opens up this passage. But if you are defeated for no reason, it will mean that you deliberately abandoned this place. This crime will not be easy for your sect to bear, will it? I heard that your sect recently wanted to become a large sect. If you let Mara's army escape from under your eyes, hey, even the Supreme Profound sect and the Hutu sect suffered a great loss at your hands. How impressive. How come you can't even defend this passage now? This place should have originally belonged to a large sect. A medium-sized sect from a remote and desolate place actually wants to occupy such a treasured place. They really deserve it." These voices were all strange, and it was obvious that they had deliberately distorted their voices. Moreover, each of their voices was abnormally fleeting, obviously not wanting others to discover their identity and hiding place. Zhenling was about to explode from these people's words, but at this critical moment of life and death, he could only endure it. Lin Yu Laozu's face immediately darkened. Although he was a pure young cultivator and one of the 13 initiators of the world's sect's encirclement against Mara's army, he was still not taken seriously by those cultivators. Although they did not dare to offend him on the surface, they secretly disdained him. Moreover, Lin Yu Laozu was obviously injured at this time. Otherwise, how could he only be in a stalemate with an Asura until now? Lin Yu Laozu did not say anything more. He knew that no matter how much he said, these people would not help him, and it would only make him a laughingstock. At this time, to be able to make a pure young cultivator lose face in front of them, who knew how many people's dark hearts would be satisfied. At this time, Han Wuya and Hua Wuyin finally found an opportunity. Taking advantage of the moment when the Asura's attention was suddenly attracted by Laozu of Qianshan's escape, the wind and rain whip took the opportunity to stir up the wind and rain. The two great cultivators had already escaped from the Asura's entanglement and retreated a few hundred feet away. However, Hua Wuin's strength had been greatly damaged, and just as the two of them retreated, he was still hit by the Asura. Although Han Wuya had tried his best to protect him, Hua Wuin still spat out a mouthful of blood, and the aura around him continued to drop. He was now no different from a mid-Dharma adept. After this battle, Hua Wuin's cultivation base had not only been severely damaged by Lu Ping, but it was also very likely that his cultivation base would fall by another level. Zhenling Lu Tianping, Lin Yu you old dog, I will remember today's gift. We have a long way to go in the future. At this time, Lu Ping did not care about Hua Wuin's harsh words. The Asura that had been shaken off by the two of them was already charging towards Zhenling and the others. You're tuning in to the Celestial War YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories,